Lord of the Mysteries, Cook, Offer Me Gold Pounds and Sweet Iced Tea by author Xiao Wutong Shui Kia Wening. Chapter 26-50. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And those who want to support me, I have a Patreon channel, get early access to video on Patreon. Chapter 26, A Kind Father and a Filial Son. Having finished the story in a narrative tone, Benefactor's Building's face was now filled with sorrow. He had been trapped in this nightmare for far too long. I will continue to play the role of Wulian Yasso's well. Wulian lowered his eyes for a long time before finally responding in such a manner. His voice was very light and soft, as if he were comforting someone. I will. Wulian knew that Benefactor's Building hadn't told the whole truth. There were too many flaws. Even if the original landlord had become a vegetable and had his original living space squeezed out by an unwelcome guest, could it really achieve the nearly as one effect that Dolly spoke of? If he set aside this doubt for now, hey, how could a decent young man, a silly and empty shell, frequently catch rats for pocket money, and even make the people at the Hound pub accustomed to his presence? Moreover, catching rats and lockpicking seemed more like special training for a Beander of the Marauder pathway, didn't it? To be more devilish about it, saying that Benefactor's Building or something else was piloting Wulian, like a Gundam, might be more fitting for the current situation. Did this father, Benefactor's Building, not even want to weave a more logically sound story? Or did he really need this clumsy excuse? Wulian's lowered gaze was deep, but when he looked up, he smiled obediently at Benefactor's Building. He repeated slowly, I will play the role of Wulian well, Dad. As long as he didn't want to be cleaned out like some strange thing. Easily poking through the wall of spirituality, Wulian found it amusing to see Leonard standing there speechless. The wall of spirituality blocked sound but not sight, so this gentleman had likely watched a silent film with his own eyes. Seeing the father and son chatting happily, he probably felt his reasons for calling for backup were insufficient, yet he didn't feel at ease if he didn't. It was truly interesting. Bah. Out of consideration for his own safety, Wulian maintained an expressionless face, looking somewhat stunned as if he had been struck. Meanwhile, Benefactor's Building finally displayed some of the demeanor of a swindler, wearing a look of suppressed pain while smiling both desolately and kindly. Keep on acting. Wulian was laughing his head off inside, but on the outside, he rolled his nearly stagnant eyes, putting on a front of forced composure. Sir, could you please invite Mr. Dunn to come over? I believe he should be nearby. Reason. Leonard stood leaning against the side of the sofa, his seemingly relaxed posture masking a tension ready to spring at any moment. To explain some of the abnormalities about me. Wulian's smile was quite forced, carrying a faint hint of pleading. This is also what you want to know, isn't it? Leonard noticed Wulian's body trembling slightly. Besides that, he seemed to be resisting Benefactor's Building, whether intentionally or not. Why, kid, you can do as he says. A slightly aged voice suddenly rang in Leonard's ear, carrying a hint of inexplicable interest. Those two won't be able to cause any trouble. I know, Leonard responded in a hushed voice, leaving the room in front of the two Yassos. Half a minute later, Wulian winked at Benefactor's Building, and a slight smile appeared on both of the father and son's faces simultaneously. Actually, he could have just opened the window and shouted. Benefactor's Building curled his lips. It's not like I wouldn't have noticed. Evil formalism. Wulian nodded in agreement. How do you plan to explain? Do you need me to do anything? No need. Benefactor's Building let out a breath that was half smile and half sigh. I've been preparing for a long time. Since when? Wulian rationally chose not to ask. With the soft click of a door handle turning, Dunsmith walked into the Yasso's house once again, familiar with the way. Speaking of which, his contact with the Nighthawks had really been a series of ups and downs. Wulian muttered to himself. One second he was putting on an act, and the next he was exposed. Every time he presented a well-behaved image, a new suspicion would pop up. If Dunn and the others hadn't been relatively trusting of his divination, dreams, and spirit mediumship, they would have developed a stress response to his repeated, crying wolf, by now. Mr. Smith. The veteran actor Benefactor's Building still looked as if he were forcing himself to stay spirited, and his hand, which had been cautiously approaching Wulian, dropped down, unnoticed. Hey, I believe I have an obligation to explain why my child has an extra spirit body. Dunn had clearly learned the general gist of the situation from Leonard and showed no surprise. He nodded steadily and said in a mellow, sighing tone, you really do hope for him to leave Tingen. He has already suffered too much harm. Benefactor's building gave a bitter smile. I have already told the previous story, and I believe you have already verified it with the Holy Cathedral, so, this is the follow-up. After part of his memory was hidden, Wulian Yassos became much quieter. He even lost interest in the Beander world, avoiding it as much as possible. As a Beander, Benefactor's building was naturally somewhat disappointed, but with his wife gone, Wulian was his only concern, so he naturally chose to go along with his son's wishes. However, Wulian's behavior became increasingly strange. He forgot his mother, forgot the Beander world, and all his memories of Winter County melted away as quickly as snow in March. One morning, when a newly awakened Wulian looked at Benefactor's building with an undisguised look of a stranger, Benefactor's building realized something was wrong, even though Wulian quickly regained his composure. Benefactor's building suspected that something had gone wrong with the concealment of the memories. But that was a ritual performed by a senior deacon of the Holy Cathedral using a holy relic. At that time, Benefactor's building was only a cryptologist. He possessed all sorts of knowledge that came with the ritual, but his spirituality was not enough to observe Wulian's abnormality. It was a silent gnawing hidden within the shell. His store of knowledge told him that only with sufficiently high spirituality could he intuitively and meticulously observe the root of Wulian's abnormality. Only then could he save his child. So, Benefactor's building began to push for Sequence 6, Prometheus. As a Zoroaster, no matter how untalented he might be, a mere Sequence 6 was certainly not dangerous. The moment he successfully consumed the potion and advanced to Prometheus, his spirituality indeed expanded several times over. Naturally, he saw the double image of Wulian's spirit body. Rather than saying there is an extra spirit inside Wulian, Benefactor's building gave a light scoff, sounding self-deprecating. It would be more accurate to say that this poor child's spirit body is unstable, and a thin consciousness has dissipated to envelop him. Whether this stems from the influence of blood relatives or from a severe shock, I still haven't figured it out. Wulian was listening with great interest when he saw Benefactor's building's gaze fall restrainedly upon him. Fortunately, this strange occurrence happened to form a delicate balance, and it stabilized completely after I frequently took Wulian to the goddess's church. Based on the oath I made back then, there is no possibility that Wulian will endanger Tingen or the Evernight. Benefactor's building stared fixedly at Dun, catching a hint of softening in his expression. There is nothing wrong with Wulian, Benefactor's building concluded. Chapter 27, Traveling Together. The development of things is a unity of progress and twists. Russell didn't say this. Wulan Soroth sat upright on the rumbling steam train, devoid of joy or sorrow, worry or fear. In short, he had reached a state of zen. What's wrong, little guy? Daily Simone, sitting beside him, glanced at Wulan and smiled teasingly. First time in a first-class carriage, nervous to death. Not exactly. Wulan let out a long breath, his moist eyes filled with helplessness. How did things even get to this point? Last night, Tingen, Yassos' house. There's no problem with Wulan, Xianlu Asos said finally. His expression was certain, his mind set on sending Wulan out of Tingen. Divination was done, dreams were entered, and spirit mediumship was completed. The information obtained through various means was explained reasonably by Xianlu. Meanwhile, the investigation against Xianlu himself was not necessarily effective due to his higher sequence. Rather than continuing the entanglement, it was better to directly interface with Backlund. Late that night, the nightmare, Dun Smith once again disturbed Wulan's good sleep, smilingly proposing that he follow daily, the newly promoted bishop of the Backlund diocese, to report to Backlund on the 1 p.m. train. It was on the way, anyway. When Wulan arrived at the platform at 12:45 p.m., he was not surprised to find a stranger's face waiting for him alongside Daly. On the way, purely on the way. This is Al Hassan, from Backlund, Daly casually introduced the middle-aged man in the gray trench coat, who nodded friendly to Wulan. Mr. Hassan, Wulan greeted politely, as if the person before him wasn't some monitor, but a university tutor he was meeting for the first time. Quite humanely, the Nighthawks covered Wulan's ticket and brought him into a first-class carriage with no one else. You guys are actually quite nice. JPG. To be honest, in this era, those with the spare cash to sit in first class must be rich or noble. Wulan didn't know how the Nighthawks convinced the original passengers of this carriage. Was there really a need for this? As for the little movements Al Hassan was making in his blind spot, Wulan's eyelids drooped. I can guess what you're doing, thanks. Wulan felt he should be like a prisoner in a TV drama, with his head and hands stuck in shackles stained with clotted, stale blood, wearing a tattered prison uniform and a large, dangerous element tag. Otherwise, it just wouldn't fit the mood. In the large carriage, Daly's seat was right next to Woolen's, while Al Hassan was across the aisle, presumably so it would be convenient for him to draw his revolver and perform an American Iajutsu. You have such high-speed Nighthawks entering Tingen. I forgot the rest. Since Woolen knew he was going to study in Backland, he had already calculated the approximate duration based on the plot in his memory, 4.5 hours. No one to talk to, no minigames, can't listen to music, can't draw, can't write novels, can't read. Oh, reading is okay, and so is sleeping. He also had his cat. Woolen breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Ms. Daly, Mr. Hassan, can I take out a book? He asked tentatively, receiving a, be our guest, gesture from the two. The swindler only had points added to agility, his constitution was still weak and could only be strengthened bit by bit through exercise. Therefore, Woolen hadn't brought much. His 20-inch suitcase only contained 2 changes of clothes, a bunch of keys, 2 novels, and about 10 pounds in spare change. Gratitude to lawyer Jurgen. If not for him, Woolen wouldn't have known that pets could board the steam train as long as they were kept in a cage and an extra ticket was paid. As for whether Weekend would be stressed by the noisy and turbulent environment of the train. Well, Woolen squatted in the aisle and patted the cage. Weekend, who was busy looking around, didn't seem to notice a thing. Speaking of which, there probably weren't many people luxurious enough to use a wall of spirituality for a pet's soundproofing, right? He pulled out the famous, Stormy Manor. Heaven knows, Woolen had gone to the bookstore to find it as soon as he settled down, but Ms. Wall's novel was so popular that it had actually sold out. After a series of events, although Woolen had managed to buy it, he hadn't been in the mood to read it until now. Cece scanned everyone present with her sharp, bright eyes, her tone slow and calm, yet possessing a cat-and-mouse-like playfulness. No, 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 the murderer's tricks are more than just this. Oh, Woolen sighed unconsciously. Ms. Wall's style leaned toward fast food literature, but the wording was carefully polished, and the continuity and explosive points of the plot were perfectly assembled. He took back his previous thought. We are not suitable, she said decisively, tears rolling down like pearls. Scenes from the past still surged in the depths of Cece's heart, but after wiping her tears, she fled the bedroom that was so familiar it hurt, leaving behind the restrained yet turbulent affection in his eyes. Just say something, you two. Woolen thought weakly. The angst was certainly there, but wasn't it OOC? It was definitely OOC, right? Fine, fine, let's call it. Concern leads to confusion, but Ms. Cece, is it really okay to make such a certain conclusion to your lover who just lost his memory? And you, male lead. What kind of move is it to keep pretending after regaining your memory? Huh, say something. The moment he heard his own voice, Woolen quickly covered his mouth. Good grief, he got too excited. Although there were only 2 Nighthawks on the train, meeting the strange looks from the two, Woolen immediately performed a grand gesture of playing dead. It's good to be young, falling asleep the moment the head hits the pillow. JPG. As soon as his eyes closed, his thoughts began to drift. Lovers who were as silent as sawed-off gourds, he had just seen a pair not long ago, and one of the main parties was sitting right next to him. Tisk, he had slipped away quickly, but could the Tingen Nighthawks, having received warnings and reinforcements, really break through the fate prison woven by 008, without casualties? One must know that both 008 and Ince Zangwill possessed sufficient patience. The church's demigods or senior deacons had their own duties, it wasn't realistic for them to be permanently stationed in Tingen. So, a more likely solution would be to unite with Storm and Machinery, increase personnel, including low and mid-sequence beyonders from other dioceses, and the Red Gloves, plus some even more powerful sealed artifacts. Hiss, it still feels a bit unsafe. Can we just call Amon's brother over to deal with 008? When Dunn entered his dream last night, Woolen had stuffed all the prepared information into him. Things like, be sure to pay attention to Mr. Neal's mental state, the statues of the demoness sect will make nightmare, abilities fail, mid-sequence demonesses will use mirrors and wooden sticks to teleport, and so on. But man proposes, heaven disposes. No one knew if these pieces of information would still be what influenced the survival of the Nighthawks under a series of changes. Should I have let the plot develop normally? Woolen thought dejectedly. Don't warn the Nighthawks, don't expose Lanrius, don't report Triss. Oh, then that trashy plot where the villain is safe and innocent lives are lost should still be changed. His precious brain should be saved for thinking about more important things, like increasing the possibility of the entire Tingen Nighthawk team surviving. And for example, playing matchmaker for a certain little couple that's stuck in place. Chapter 28, Unlocking a New Area. Known. Dunn likes Dolly, feeling inferior about his age and talent. Dolly likes Dunn, trapped in the past and hesitation. Find. How to defend the love between Dunn and Dolly. Writing the word, solution, earns no points. Extra credit, 20 points. Accompanied by the squeak squeak sound of chalk on a blackboard, Wulian was still pretending to sleep, or rather, play dead, but the little person in his heart did a kip up and started tapping the blackboard with a thump thump thump. Classmates, what's the first step in solving a problem? Hey, read the prompt. Everyone look, there's a trap in the phrasing of this prompt. What is it? It only mentions love. Frantically tapping the blackboard, in fact, what are the hidden conditions? Dunn has to stay alive, this couple has to survive this hurdle. Half the students fail right here. Once that prerequisite is met, then what? Confession. Confirming the relationship. Setting a romantic atmosphere. Getting them fast-tracked into the church. As for how to solve it, what are you looking at? Al-Hassan suddenly spoke, startling Wulian so much he almost jumped. Dolly chuckled and responded unhurriedly, I'm looking at this little guy who's thinking so hard. Oh my, you scared him. Wulian opened his eyes helplessly, his expression faintly resentful. How could he have forgotten about spirit vision? A spirit medium comes with spirit vision, and there's sequence suppression. Since pretending to sleep couldn't ease the awkwardness, then don't blame him for transferring the pain. Ms. Daly. The boy turned his head shyly and muttered under her interested gaze, do you know what a woman chasing a man is like a layer of gauze means? Dolly. Perfect. With one sentence, I've hard crowd controlled the veteran for 30 seconds. Wulian pretended not to see Dolly's growing murderous intent, nor did he care about Al-Hassan, who was unexpectedly enjoying the drama. With innocent and clear brown eyes, he asked curiously, are we going straight to the church after getting off? Do I need to take an oath or something? My luggage and the cat. To your residence first, Dolly said with a cold smile. Okay, Wulian nodded obediently. Weak, pitiful, and helpless. JPG. Arriving smoothly at Backland Station, the three people and one cat got off the train together, plunging into the thick, choking fog along with the crowd. Where do you plan to stay? Dolly asked Wulian casually, receiving the answer, no. 23, Pesfield Street, which was less than 200 meters from St. Samuel's Church. Dolly nodded. Dolly looked thoughtful. Dolly and Al-Hassan exchanged looks. As the headquarters of the Church of the Night in Backland Street, Samuel's Church was prestigious enough to have a subway line connected to it. Soon, the group arrived in the North District and reached No. 23, Pesfield Street, where, barring any accidents, Wulian would be living for quite a long time. It was a two-story small building located on a street corner, dark-colored and simple in style, appearing to be quite old. Compared to the grander designs of its neighbors, it wasn't particularly striking, merely meeting the standards of middle-class decency. Surprisingly, although the house had been uninhabited for a long time, the small garden was planted with many plants, roses, mint, marigolds, lavender, and they were quite well maintained. Wulian let out a soft exclamation, pulled a bunch of keys from his pocket, and opened the beautifully patterned wrought iron gate. With a faint sound, the iron gate swung open in a beautiful arc. Wulian didn't show any gentlemanly grace at this moment, stepping into the yard first. Shortly after, the front door of the house was also opened. The interior was very clean. Wulian had originally worried about getting a nose full of dust, the physical version. His gaze swept briefly. The first floor was quite spacious, the living room was bright, and the sofa was large and soft. After inviting the two Nighthawks inside to sit, Wulian quickly found a guest room to place his luggage and released Weekend from her cage to patrol her territory, though for now, it was only this room. Achoo! The cat's first reaction was a big sneeze, followed by a flap flap, shaking of her fur and scratching an itch. Backland's air spares no living creature. Wulian, who still didn't dare to take deep breaths, thought helplessly. He followed his instincts to the kitchen and checked the food supplies. There were no fresh vegetables or fruits at all, but there were stocks of black tea and coffee powder, with no signs of dampness or insects. Wulian pinched a bit and sniffed it. It was good quality Marquis black tea and Highland coffee. There was also an unopened bag of powdered sugar, but there was no hope for fresh milk or lemons. Coffee or black tea, you too? Wulian asked the two people sitting relaxedly on the sofa, adding softly, but there's no milk or lemon slices left. Al-Hassan shook his head in refusal, while Dolly chose black tea. Long-term companionship leads to boredom. Perhaps, a new choice will bring a different kind of pleasure. Wulian's face remained calm, but his movements of boiling water and getting the tea clearly sped up. Ms. Daly is turning up the heat. Carrot versus carrot. Scared. JPG. Leaving a light on for weekend, Wulian walked with the two Nighthawks toward the not-so-distant pure black church. Fortunately, there's some distance between the three of us, otherwise it would really feel like an escort. Night falls so early in Backland, I bet the lighting expenses will double. Oh, I also need to find a nearby market. Weekend and I can't starve until tomorrow morning, can we? Or find a restaurant. While Wulian was thinking about these random things, the sound of pigeons cooing and fluttering their wings reached his ears. Reached the plaza. Wulian looked toward the sound. The dark church, shrouded in dust and fog, couldn't be seen in its entirety at a glance, yet it exuded a deeper sense of holiness, giving a strong sense of repression. But as the distance gradually closed, that fear of a collapsing building rapidly faded, replaced by a sense of stillness and tranquility. Perhaps because the starlight by the roadside was soft enough, the people coming and going through the church foyer walked with light steps, as if tacitly protecting a handful of peaceful dreams. Cheap old father, I kind of understand why you converted. Wulian thought. It was only then that he suddenly realized something. This was the first time he had stepped into the goddess's church. After all, the church school wasn't within the scope of the church itself. Amidst the low, mellow sound of scriptures being recited, Wulian walked lightly where the goddess's gaze fell. Thinking that he, a natural traitor, was actually still a believer of the goddess, he couldn't help but find it amusing, and then he started worrying that the goddess would strike him dead with a bolt of lightning. Oh, lightning isn't the goddess's domain, so it's fine. The irreverent person looked up and was momentarily blinded by the flickering candlelight. Looking again, he saw a massive sacred emblem with a deep black background, adorned with brilliance, and half covered in crimson. This way, Dolly reminded Wulian in a low voice, leading him to the side of the church with Al-Hassan following. After nodding to a priest who had been standing there for a long time, they followed a secret, winding staircase and entered the underground area of the church. Chapter 29, An Unexpected Option. Walking through the deep corridors beneath the cathedral, Wulian finally realized something was wrong. As a wild Beander, even if he had registered with the authorities, at most they should have taken him to the Blackthorn Security Company, whatever it was called in Backland, right? Why come to the cathedral? Are they dropping the act? Are they going to focus fire me? This tension peaked when he saw a middle-aged man with a trench coat and a high-collared shirt. Senior deacon of the Church of the Night, Goddess's Sword, a Sequence 5 spirit warlock in possession of a saint's artifact, and one of the three leaders of the Red Gloves, Crescia Sexissima. Your Excellency Sisima. Dolly and Al-Hassan weren't surprised at all, greeting the newcomer one after another. Sisima nodded, his dark green eyes turning toward Wulian. The poor kid was trying his best to adjust his expression, preparing to put on a harmless-looking smile. Good evening, Excel. I heard you wanted to report something to the church. Wulian blanked out visibly. Follow me. Sisima turned and left. The remaining two Nighthawks didn't seem to plan on following, merely escorting Wulian with their gazes, making him suppress his unease as he jogged to catch up with Sisima and entered an excessively silent room. Only a single candelabra was lit in the room. The man, whose entire body was buried in the darkness, didn't seem to need this bit of light. His slightly closed eyes only flashed with a sharp glint when the candlelight flickered, like some predator waiting for its chance. And I'm the lunch box. Wulian used inner snark to ease his nervousness. Seeing a cup of steaming black tea on the table, he felt a bit more at ease. Let me introduce myself. Once Wulian was seated, Sisima spoke directly. I am Crescia Sexissima, a senior deacon of the church. His lips were hidden by his collar, but a sense of solemnity reached Wulian's ears through his tone. I want to talk to you about 008, as well as your intentions. Mr. Zoroaster. A perfect opportunity, Wulian thought. 008 should still be in Tingen within Zangwil. Backland was not within its range of influence. Since all that is spoken must be known, his knowledge of 008 already exceeded what could be explained. He could no longer stay out of it. Once the Tingen matter was settled, 008 would still know of Woolen Sorov's anomaly. Speaking or not wouldn't change that outcome. The Nighthawks should already understand that Ince Zangwil was coveting Saint Selena's ashes. This was what he had blurted out when Dunn entered his dream. But the entire chain, from the Antigonus family's notebook to the Lanrius evil god descent case to the mastermind's appearance, and the skull of Azek's descendant, these clues were not yet clear enough. Sisima just happened to have a high enough level to know detailed information about 008 and its origin, but I don't dare to say. Wulian heard his own somewhat hoarse voice. You know its characteristics. I know I've already attracted its attention, but I only dared to provide those vague hints before. Wulian suddenly laughed, his heart feeling bitter. I was being quite optimistic. I thought that if I refused to reveal everything, I might not become a target. 008 would kill with haste, or at least delay it until it was dealt with and resolved. We are making efforts to resolve it, Sisuma replied calmly, with no intention of criticizing Wulian's cowardice. Then what about Xiao Ke? With the plot changes so far, Lanrius had been caught, and Triss had lost her threat. The true creator and Cheek would have other vessels, and they would still have many followers. He only needed to enjoy the thrill of saving. Even the process of fighting evil hadn't involved much risk. But what about Xiao Ke, the only one in the gods' plan who couldn't be touched? Would he face a super luxurious ending of inexplicably going insane and being erased by an eraser in a peaceful world where everyone around him wears a monocle? Returning to 008 itself, could he really help the Nighthawks regain control of this Grade 0 sealed artifact by revealing everything he knew? The priority for being noticed versus facing a backlash was worlds apart. You lived in Winter County for 7 years, Sisuma said suddenly, his tone as rigid as if he were reading a document. I have no intention of disclosing the specifics, but you have been watched by 008 for a long time. But it hasn't made a lethal move. Wulian's voice suddenly hitched. Why did he, or rather the original alternate identity, come into the body of Wulan Sorov? After transmigrating those minor incidents belonging to 008, was it really just because its desire to kill him wasn't strong enough? At some unknown point, he had already become meat on the chopping block. Who would care if a piece of meat kept its mouth shut? What can I get from the Nighthawks? Wulian asked without much hope. Yes, talking about these things before everything was explained was just holding out for a better price, even though Wulian had already decided to tell all. Ultimately, he was afraid of death. Sisuma seemed to have already considered this. He pushed 2 documents out from the darkness, revealing them under a patch of light. At some point, several more lamps had been lit in the room. Spirit Warlock is really convenient. Wulian thought inappropriately, looking down at the 2 ordinary-looking sheets of paper. Confidentiality clause, and joining the Nighthawks. Wulian's voice rose sharply at the end. He stared at Sisuma, his face filled with unmasked surprise. In any case, you need to sign a confidentiality clause. You can fully trust its binding power, Sisuma said with a hint of amusement. And after taking the oath and undergoing an inspection, you can choose to join us and complete your studies normally, or rather, that will be your place of work during university. He finally added, of course, I need to know the answers to the first 2 questions. And even if you aren't willing to join, you can still seek help from us when signs appear. You already know the way. Under the flickering light, Sisuma's eyes seemed a bit deeper. Wulian chose to answer the second question first. The intention is simple. I have a basic respect and goodwill toward the Nighthawks, which makes it impossible for me to remain indifferent when I know their future situation. As for leaking too much, it can only be said that the abilities of a nightmare are still too difficult to guard against. In other words, you're doing this entirely out of a desire to help people. Sisuma seemed quite interested. Wulian didn't know what those even deeper eyes meant, but he still chose to tell the truth. Because of some contact, I personally have a good impression of Mr. Klein Moretti. He made a tiny bit gesture and quickly explained, a very proper good impression. He has done divinations and answered questions for me. So it's a bit of, love me, love my dog. As for the first question, the unqualified swindler sighed. Regarding the source of information, do you know about a priori? It claims that human knowledge exists prior to sensation and practice. In other words, before an event happens, it is already known by certain people. Sisuma was non-committal about this excuse. Then, what about the event itself? 008, or rather in Zangwill's plan, was supposed to be like this. In a very short time, Wulian organized his thoughts and recounted the contents written by the Quill of Alzuhad in the original work. Wulian didn't intentionally hide the part about the Antigonus family's notebook. It was an indisputable fact that Klein Moretti and his 2 classmates were caught up in this conspiracy, and he had already cleared his own suspicion. Adding embellishments at this point would only be counterproductive. It was during the narration that Wulian, his throat dry, stopped to take a sip of red tea and noticed an omission. He had trusted his grasp of the plot too much. In the original work, Dunn's dream of seeing the true creator happened on Selena's birthday. But this dream session targeting heinous Fencent had been moved forward significantly under Wulian's intentional control, completely missing the time when Heinous received his reward, and the matter seemed to have come to an end. But after Heinous, Syracuse, and Lanrius were captured, were the captain and the others really completely away from the true creator's corruption? Had the seed inside Lanrius, and that bit of divinity, really been completely removed? How many more seeds of disaster had been buried outside of the true creator in a conspiracy that was essentially meant to weaken Dun? Chapter 30. Also recruited. Compared to the Tingin matters he already mostly knew, Sisima had developed a rather strong interest in Wulian. The prophecy from his mouth was far too detailed. Even a high sequence, mystery prior, let alone a seer, could definitely not achieve such a level. Seeing Wulian start to daze off as he spoke, Sisima wasn't in a hurry. When the boy across from him recklessly reminded him that Lanrius and the others might pose a hidden danger and pleaded with him to reconfirm the status of Dun and the rest, the senior deacon actually laughed out loud. Wulian, when it comes to matters related to evil gods, we are inherently cautious enough. Sisima shook his head gently. The Church of the Night has been passed down to this day. Without a reasonable system of regulation, it would have long since collapsed into disorder. In other words, the captain and the others have been carefully checked. And the precautions in Tingin are much more optimistic than I imagined. Wulian's eyes lit up with a swish, meeting Sisima's affirmative nod. Having finished telling the last bit of the story, Wulian very proactively took the confidentiality agreement. The terms were quite simple, mainly restricting him from mentioning the existence of Beyonders to ordinary people. Wulian had signed a similar one back in Tingin. The signature on the document was Wulian Yassos. Since either surname could correspond to him in a mysticism sense anyway, it didn't really matter. If there are no other questions, you can tell me your choice, Sisima said. I volunteer to join the Nighthawks. Wulian responded almost without thinking. I'm on the payroll. I'm on the payroll. Who could refuse such a temptation? Then, I still need to check the condition of your body, mind, and soul. Sisima nodded. Dolly said there's a certain problem with your spirit, an unstable spirit body. That's probably not quite what it is. Wulian thought guiltily. A prospective Nighthawk with an unstable spirit body is practically like a prospective police officer with a major surgical history. It's basically a criminal record, hey. Quite suddenly, Sisima began to chant. It was a softly melodic nocturne. It was hard to imagine it coming from a middle-aged man's mouth. Listening to it, Wulian couldn't help but close his eyes, feeling a bit drowsy. Gradually, the sound in Wulian's ears began to change pitch, like an Arhuar guitar string snapping with a crack, while the musician remained unaware, joined by car horns, the rumble of trains, the never-ending gurgle of a washing machine, and the buzzing and clattering of house renovations that seemed ready to drill through his brain. A burst of blurred and piercing screams charged through Wulian's head like Zhao Zilong of Changshan. He frowned deeply and rubbed his temples, his expression looking a bit pained. Finally, Sisima stopped. Better than I expected, he commented. Wulian forced a weak smile. After swearing an oath to the goddess, you may leave. Sisima didn't seem to have any awareness of caring for a minor. He picked up the silver-white case by his feet, his movements pausing slightly. You should have mastered Hermes' language. Yes. Wulian nodded, but his gaze was glued to that beautiful box, which looked like a violin case. This size, it's perfect. The left half can fit the largest size of color paper, and after stacking the color paper by size, the remaining space can hold postcards, Polaroids, and such. As for the badges. With a soft click, all of Wulian's thoughts froze. The river and sky are of one color, without a speck of dust. A lonely moon hangs bright in the void. Wulian thought for no reason. What a beautiful bone sword. The sword was pure white. Not long, clear and cold, delicate yet perilous. The latter word wasn't quite right for the occasion, but it was inexplicably fitting. There seemed to be some patterns on it. It looks even more like the moon. Wulian's gaze grew deeper and deeper, gradually losing its luster. The dark color that had been restrained while in Tingin quietly overflowed, locking darkly behind his lenses. At this moment, Sisima moved the case. The liberated Wulian blinked, hearing the other's voice as if it were coming from far to near. You should swear your oath upon the holy relic. Okay. Wulian slowly stood up, suddenly realizing the surroundings had dimmed significantly, all the brilliance gathered upon that bright short sword. This sword is practically the ultimate night light. Wulian complained inwardly while walking around the table towards Sisima, his steps a bit unsteady. A glance. Beautiful. Another glance. Truly beautiful. One more, not calculating the angle well. Someone's gaze plunged straight into that patch of white and couldn't be pulled out again. Played it too far. Wulian took this opportunity to take a good look at this beautiful bone sword. After a soft sigh, the reckless one regained his freedom. Finding where the bone sword was by memory, Wulian very, very lightly stroked that smooth surface, as if scooping the moon from a pond. Recite after me, Sisima said. Seeing Wulian nod, his eyes, which had turned deep black, gazed at the boy, his voice low and slow like a whisper. Evernight goddess, more noble than the cosmos, more ancient than eternity, I swear to you by my true name and my spirituality. I, Woolen Sorov, from this moment forth, shall never reveal the corresponding information of 008 to those without authorization. Should I violate this, I shall submit to your punishment. Please witness my oath. This 008 thing was so stingy that not even a word could be said. Woolen had no intention of revealing it to others anyway, so naturally, he didn't find this oath difficult. But, doesn't the acting method need to be restricted? And the kind of oath cheap old father once made about not acting against the Church of the Night. Woolen swore the oath after Sisima in his reasonably proficient Hermes language, his thoughts beginning to wander again. Goddess, goddess, are you there? I'm an ally. I'm on the same side as Xiao Ke. Goddess, goddess, are you asleep? Could you give me some benefits? I'm a good person. Goddess. All right. Sisima signaled Woolen to withdraw his hand and closed the case containing the holy relic. The light in the room returned to normal, and the person who was harassing the deity could only regretfully stop. Remember to find Dolly tomorrow, she will be your direct superior from now on. Go straight down the stairs, and it's the second room on the right. She'll tell you the rest. Sisima's tone relaxed. As for the matters in Tingen, you can rest assured. Got it. Woolen listened with a smile, but the protests from his stomach were coming in wave after wave. Not leaving yet. Sisima's voice carried a hint of a smile. Bye-bye, Lord Sisima. Woolen got up unhurriedly, turned around, and then left like the wind. Dinner, dinner, dinner. As for the chill down his spine, just an illusion, ha 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 ha. At least for now, he's still just a child. Krestia Sexisima murmured thoughtfully to himself, finally shaking his head with a light laugh and getting up to leave. The room sank into darkness once more. Chapter 31. A beautiful beginning. In the morning in Backland, the sunlight finally gathered enough strength to pierce through the mist, illuminating the bustling traffic of this prosperous city, as well as number 23, Pesfield Street. In a bedroom on the second floor, a quilt was toasted soft and warm, and a cat was curled up on top of it, yawning incessantly. Suddenly, a hand reached out rudely, pulling a corner of the quilt with a speed exceeding that of an ordinary person, and covered the owner's belly button with a sense of ritual. Woolen wriggled twice with satisfaction and rolled over. Weekend hadn't slept well to begin with, and with the quilt beneath her pulled away, her resentment flared up. With a meow, she stepped onto Woolen's neck. MMPH, MMPH, MMPH. Woolen whimpered as he opened his eyes. The moment he set down the heartless creature, he began to cough frantically. His windpipe felt like it had been flattened. You, cough, your breakfast for today is gone. Woolen finally caught his breath and informed the perpetrator of this bad news through gritted teeth. Meow. Weekend hid far away, calling out in a thin, delicate voice, her face full of innocence. Halved. Woolen gave in without any principles and got out of bed dejectedly to wash up. It was already too late when he left the church yesterday. Woolen had hurriedly found a restaurant and bought some oxtail soup with oat bread, and also ordered a plate of roasted chicken breast for Weekend, the kind without oil or salt. After satisfying his stomach, the fellow with a poor sense of direction circled around twice before finding his residence. After feeding the cat, he pulled out a set of bedding and hurriedly went to sleep. Wiping away non-existent tears of bitterness, Woolen pressed open the gun-black silver inlaid pocket watch in his hand and took a look. Oh, it's only 11 in the morning. Woolen smiled friendly at Weekend. Well, your breakfast is indeed gone. As expected of Backland, Woolen marveled as he carried a large bag of ingredients and 2 sizzling, oily Dixie pies, stepping into the house with the mindset of a returning hunter. Weekend, come here, there's something good. He raised his voice to call the cat, just in time to free a hand to take a bite of the Dixie pie he had been craving since he started reading novels. Ow, ho, ho, ho. The slightly hot meat filling danced in his mouth, and Woolen took small breaths to save his tongue. The freshly baked pie didn't have a hint of gaminess, the meat filling, a mix of fat and lean, was oily and moist, making one's appetite soar. The combination of diced apples and other spices created a wonderful and excellent seasoning. Thus, Weekend, who had deigned to come to the door, saw an evil human who was focused on devouring the pie and completely ignored the cat. Amidst the cat's unhappy cries, Woolen finished off those 2 steaming pies and rubbed his belly contentedly. He reached out to pet Weekend and opened the bag containing dried chicken like presenting a treasure. Try it, how is it? Weekend sniffed the bag and didn't seem very interested, showing no intention of taking a bite. All right, I'll boil some chicken breast for you later. Wulian was thinking about whether to hire a maid-of-all-work or a cook to help while picking up a piece of dried meat and stuffing it into his mouth. Meow ow 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 ow. Weekend pawed at Wulian's leg with a look of, how could you do this, while the food protective Wulian instead quickly finished that large piece of dried meat. No salt, but it tastes good. Wulian smacked his lips and belatedly realized what weekend meant. She was waiting for Wulian to shred it for her. And he just started eating it himself. Coughing guiltily, Wulian honestly began to process the dried meat for weekend. As long as she liked it, at least she wouldn't go hungry when he went to school. But, a maid of all work. Wulian looked around the clean room and shook his head with a smile. How could the cheap old father not even mention that he had hired someone to clean? After another long and comfortable afternoon nap, Wulian stretched while leisurely admiring the grand cathedral across the way through the bright, clean window. Cathedral. Wulian blinked, wondering if it was too late to switch to the nightmare sequence. Forgetfulness. Is this a symptom a swindler should have? In any case, Wulian resignedly walked toward that pure black cathedral. When it became his workplace, it suddenly didn't seem so solemn and beautiful. There were many white pigeons in the square in front of the cathedral. Unlike those modern, ground chickens, with clipped feathers, these pigeons' feathers were shiny and intact, and they would take a beautiful glide around the cathedral whenever the mood struck. Wulian subconsciously looked for an old gentleman with graying temples and deep blue eyes among the crowd feeding the pigeons, then let out a self-deprecating chuckle after realizing what he was doing. It's still far too early. After entering the cathedral, Wulian originally wanted to go straight to find Dolly. But looking at that dark sacred emblem imbued with a sense of serenity, this not-so-devout believer of the goddess still intended to perform his first prayer in life. He found a random seat, clasped his hands in front of his chest, closed his eyes, and whispered silently to himself. Evernight goddess, more noble than the cosmos, more ancient than eternity. Please bless Xiao Kei's journey to be smooth and safe. Please bless everyone in Tingen to be safe and worry-free. Please bless me to keep my little life so I can eat, drink, and have fun. Sorry for disturbing you, goddess. I wish you good food, good sleep, and a smooth advancement. After earnestly tapping 4 points on his chest, Wulian spoke softly, praise the goddess. He stood up and walked toward the underground. Dolly did not pursue Wulian's act of standing her up for half the day. Rather, she didn't seem to care much about it. Yo, little guy. Dolly smiled lazily. Is it my turn to treat you to coffee this time? Thank you. Wulian responded tentatively, earning a more hearty laugh from the other party. Seeing Wulian sit properly in the opposite chair, Dolly brewed coffee unhurriedly while informing him of matters Sisama hadn't detailed. Besides the cathedral, number 12, Sicilier Street across the way is also an activity area for the Nighthawks. That's a poetry lovers alliance. They've finally stopped using that old-fashioned security company as a cover. It's truly worth celebrating. Poetry, it seems quite suitable for a place where midnight poets and related sequences of the Nighthawks gather. Wulian sighed deeply in his heart. I am a farmer, this is the sugar beet. Dolly glanced at the teenager with a smile on his lips and pushed the coffee and sugar jar toward him. You're still a minor, it's not your turn to go on duty yet. But, for safety reasons, you can spend more time there in your leisure. Additionally, this lady with an eerie beauty gave a grim smile. In the morning, you need to study mysticism knowledge with me, systematic knowledge. The afternoon is for combat and shooting training. But I'm a swine. Wulian, who had been unilaterally beaten by his cheap old father back in Tingen, felt a bad premonition, but he still met Dolly's death sentence, starting tomorrow, 2 p.m. at number 12, Sicilier Street. Someone there will help you, don't worry, the space there is quite ample. Is that what I'm worried about? Wulian only dared to talk back in the lowest possible voice, which was even less clear than a mosquito's hum. As expected, Ms. Daly is still angry because I was late. Chapter 32 Lavender. Thankfully, Dolly didn't withhold the first afternoon Wulian was to enjoy in Backland. Tossing out a long-prepared employment file to complete the formalities, the lady quite generously let Wulian go. Oh, right, there's more good news. Wulian, was now an unofficial member of the Backland Nighthawks. With a weekly salary of £5. According to Ms. Daly, Wulian had just joined and should have had a weekly salary of £4, equivalent to Backland's civilian staff, since the Nighthawks didn't need a student to take on much responsibility. As for the extra £1, that was a small perk for Sequence 8. That's £5. Wulian's steps were light, and he felt almost happy enough to fly. When he reached his front gate, Wulian's pace suddenly faltered for a moment before turning light and silent. The door was ajar, In the yard was a young girl. She wore a white shirt with ruffled edges and a brown vest on top, paired with a flowing long skirt of the same color scheme. This outfit was suitable neither for summer nor for labor, but it didn't seem to dampen her interest in carefully watering the flowers. Hello. Wulian stood still a few steps away. The girl paused for a moment then turned her head, her gaze quickly scanning Wulian once. Who are you? Wulian Yassos, this is my home. Wulian pointed to the door not far away. Your home. The girl seemed to have just remembered something. Her suspicious gaze lingered on Wulian's ordinary uniform linen shirt for a second, but she chose to ignore the question. Then, will you still need me to come and clean? The girl followed up with this question immediately, as if she had long considered what to say when the owner returned. She then added, previously, I cleaned the interior once every Sunday, and tended the garden every Thursday and Sunday. Sorry, my name is Lavender. Nay, sorry. Wulian stopped himself just in time and instead smiled regretfully. I'm used to cleaning myself. Perhaps I can settle your pay for this period, let's go inside and talk. Lavender was visibly a bit dejected. I guess the salary my cheap old father offered wasn't low, the relatively decent clothing this lady is wearing also proves that. Wulian thought. He would have been quite happy to have someone help look after his residence, if not for 008, and whatever Beander-related risks. Of course, he could easily let Lavender maintain her current frequency, even if she came for a few hours every day. There was a high probability she wouldn't discover his little secrets, but the manipulability of such a stable connection was still too high. If needed, he would rather find a random hourly worker. It's better than this lady opening the door one day and finding herself particularly wanting to stab her employer to death, with a handy tool nearby. Wulian thought coldly. Would you like some black tea or coffee? Wulian invited Lavender inside, feeling that a dry conversation wasn't the way to treat a guest, so he simply got up to boil water. He was going to drink some anyway. Black tea, thank you. Lavender replied, taking 2 keys from her vest pocket and placing them on the low table. Clearly, these corresponded to the yard and front door of No. 23, Pesfield Street. Now, Wulian set a teacup and a small saucer with lemon slices in front of her, adding 2 slices of fresh lemon to his own black tea. He took a sip of tea, his face puckering slightly, then continued as if nothing had happened. Let's talk about the remuneration. What was the previous settlement plan? Too much lemon, so sour, so sour, so sour. Maybe I can add some sugar after this girl leaves. It can't be that I bought the wrong variety, right? Wulian grimaced inwardly. Monthly, Lavender followed up aptly. At the end of every month, the master of the house would send me £2 and 10 sol. £2 is the salary, and the rest is the cost of sending 2 photos. One of the yard, and one of the interior. Whoa, actually so diligent. Wulian thought of the well-growing plants in the garden. This business must have started at least half a year ago. It was conceivable that this was originally prepared for the original owner. You can probably save on the cost of taking photos this month. Wulian's smile faded slightly. Well, there's still more than half the month left. How about we settle it at £1 and 10 sol? Consider it gratitude for your hard work in taking care of this place. Lavender naturally had no objection. After seeing Lavender off, Wulian planned to take advantage of his free time to buy some things, aside from food. Clothes make the man, Wulian muttered as he strolled through the bustling streets. He hadn't missed the strange look Lavender had given him earlier. Let me think. I have £7 and 2 sol left. Tisk, obviously not enough for a formal suit. Besides, I can't exactly get beaten up while wearing a tailcoat, can I? Sigh, what exactly should middle-class teenagers wear? Should I be gaudily dressed in all black like the Iwas public school uniform? Wulian recalled the gold-trimmed black outfits in the original owner's memory, complete with everything from formal wear to watch chains, and finally decided to buy according to his own heart. He didn't need to maintain the decency of any particular class. Finding a classically decorated clothing and hat shop by the roadside, Wulian was led by a waiter to look around. He was in luck, there were styles he liked. 2 well-made thin trench coats, along with several sets of shirts, trousers, leather boots, and ties, all these together cost Wulian a bit over £5. As for top hats and canes, Wulian admitted he was a bit tempted, but they seemed to have no practical value for him. Pretending to be oblivious to the waiter's hints for a tip, Wulian set his next stop at the Gardley department store in Sherwood Borough. With a purchasing power of about $1,000, I shouldn't come back empty-handed, right? Wulian had originally thought so. Then he saw a small bag of pet biscuits for 4 sol. This is a new product from the Backland Pet Care Company, very popular. The waiter in a bright vest promoted it enthusiastically. It's made of venison from Lindbergh and various fresh fruits and vegetables. It's crispy and a very healthy premium pet snack. Wulian maintained a perfunctory smile while his eyes scanned the price list, trying to find a more reasonable choice, both in terms of price and nutritional value. Can I ask about the approximate content of egg, meat in these biscuits? Wulian picked up a bag of biscuits with a chicken label. At 1 sol per pound, it was also expensive, but compared to the first one, it was actually a value pack. I'm not sure, sir. The waiter gave Wulian an ambiguous look, as if he thought he was prying into some trade secret. But I can guarantee that the taste of these biscuits is also excellent, and the repurchase rate is very high. That's because the bulk of the market is here. Wulian thought with amusement. Canned meat puree, dried jerky, bones, various clockwork toys, and fabric dolls, the prototypes of modern pet supplies could basically be seen here. But what about nutritionally balanced kibble, easy-to-feed wet pouches, and freeze-dried treats? Wulian narrowed his eyes slightly, wondering if he could make something happen here. But he suddenly remembered something that had been buried for a long time. Didn't he still have to digest the swindler potion? Chapter 33, Reunion and First Meeting. Even if Wulian had no clue how to digest the potion, the sinful second day still tiptoed over and gave him a thwack. At 8 in the morning, Wulian, with messy semi-long chestnut hair and half a steaming Dixie pie in his mouth, stared blankly at the pigeons in the white square in front of St. Samuel's Church. Late again. Wulian's heart was like cold ashes. But Wulian knew which was more suicidal, being 5 minutes late or openly eating breakfast in the church. Munch, munch. Hot. Phew, phew. Fragrant. Giving the last bit of crust to the pigeons as a snack, Wulian clapped his hands and stepped into the church doors with a solemn expression. Perhaps he arrived just in time, or perhaps out of consideration for it being the first day of teaching, Dolly didn't make things difficult for Wulian this time. After confirming his grasp of mysticism knowledge, this spirit guide began a systematic teaching more in line with Nighthawk's standards. However, whether it was a personal hobby or a hidden agenda, some knowledge not in the necessary reserves, especially necromantic spells and methods of manipulation, appeared quite frequently in Dolly's lectures. Is she trying to digest spirit guide? Wulian quickly realized. Anyway, as a member of the cowardly trio, he could only have a support role for a long time to come. It wasn't a bad thing to learn more about the combat methods of Death, Pathway Beyonders. The Evernight Pathway starts driving spirits from Spirit Warlock. Anyway, it's just a preview, no big deal. Speaking of which, is it necessary to contact Klein? Although he and Ms. Daly had both intentionally or unintentionally mentioned the word digestion to the captain, with the captain's memory, he probably still needs a detailed explanation of the acting method, and it could also serve as a cover for Klein, saving him the trouble of explaining the source of the acting method. Hiss. Wulian felt a chill on his neck and shuddered violently. Realizing he had been spacing out, he began to peek at Dolly's expression, a kind smile, then he was doomed. Don't worry. Dolly's voice was gentle, I just asked a little fellow to get close to you. It's very cool, isn't it? Wulian smiled sheepishly and nodded, quickly wiping his neck, which still felt cold. Tisk, a bit repulsive. Wulian had no intention of opening his spirit vision at all. At 2 in the afternoon, with a mindset of facing death, Wulian arrived at the door of the so-called Poetry Lovers Association named Midnight Hymn. The decor here leaned towards a classical style, with every brick and tile carrying the scent of age. Through the doorway and the wooden lattice window beside it, it wasn't hard to see the warm-colored walls and beautiful leather sofas inside, with several rattan lounge chairs surrounding a desk. Like a cafe, or a tea house. Wulian thought. At this moment, 3 men and 2 women were sitting loosely on the sofas. Some were reading newspapers, others were chatting, among them was an acquaintance. Good afternoon, Mr. Hassan. Wulian stepped inside and greeted the charming middle-aged man warmly, his clear eyes curving slightly with a smile, looking exceptionally well-behaved. Just call me Al. Al nodded to him, clearly much less guarded than before. I really didn't expect you to become our colleague so quickly. I'm surprised too. Wulian listened with a smile as Al introduced the people present. Luoluota, a gravedigger, and also your marksmanship teacher for the next period of time. The heroic-looking black-haired woman nodded friendly to Wulian, who returned a bright smile. Wow, a cool big sister. This is Sugra, our midnight poet. In case you get the wrong idea, she has nothing to do with the Socrates in Russell's fables. Pervasive everywhere, that yellow peach thief. Wulian complained silently in his heart, looking up to greet the girl with light blonde curls and a quiet, somewhat gloomy air. Speaking of which, this Ms. Sugra quite fit the image of a poetry lover. Borgia, a rare, Malay scholar, the sequence 8 of the Mystery Prior pathway. He doesn't look easy to get along with, haha, and in fact, he's about the same. You'll have to be careful when learning combat with him. Borgia seemed dissatisfied with Al's words and let out a cold snort from his nose, which actually reinforced the credibility of Al's words. Ham, a sleepless, of the Evernight pathway. His brother, corpse collector, Berg, went on patrol today, otherwise you'd see how similar the two of them are. The man with warm brown curls didn't look very old, and with a few freckles, he looked very soft. Bah, it's just a homophone, don't really treat the brothers as a hamburger. Wulian conducted a profound self-reflection. Eating Dixie pie for 4 meals in a row really makes one stupid. As for me, Al smiled, I'm a nightmare, just like that old fellow Dunn. No, Mr. Al. At least you know how to maintain yourself much better than Mr. Dunn. Wulian thought of something so rude that Dolly would chase him for miles, but on the surface, he was a picture of student-like humility. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Wulian Yassos, a sequence 8 feet swindler. Except for Al Hassan, the other Nighthawks seemed a bit surprised, but only for a brief moment. Then when you talk about serious business, remember to take an oath first. Otherwise, I won't believe you. Ham joked quickly, his face full of kindness. Yes, sir. Wulian gave a somewhat non-standard police salute, which effectively triggered more laughter. Tisk, 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 maybe I even have some talent for digesting, clown. Phew, ha, phew, cough cough. Wulian panted heavily with his hands on his knees, looking very unrefined. After failing to recover for a long while, he simply slid down against the wall and sat. Good thing I didn't wear new clothes. He thought inexplicably. Exhausted, Luoluoda walked closer with her arms crossed, leaning down to the boy's flushed face. Do you, swindlers, not have any physical fitness bonuses? Only added agility. Wulian tried to defend himself. Since Luoluoda was too close, he had no choice but to struggle to stand up and move 2 steps sideways as inconspicuously as possible. What kind of decent person ignores the trainee's physique and starts with a volley of blank rounds for them to dodge? Plus high-intensity gun-holding practice, non-stop shooting training, and bullet attacks that get harsher every time. If it weren't for off-duty time, Wulian seriously suspected this shooting teacher wouldn't have let him go so easily. I see. Luoluoda nodded thoughtfully, the curve of her mouth lifting a bit more, but you seem to be able to adapt. Wulian. So, you will be like them, abandon me, will you? After withdrawing some money from the nearby Backland Bank, Wulian's indignant mood was inexplicably and effectively soothed. He scooped a large spoonful of pudding into his mouth. The rich caramel aroma mixed with the silky smooth texture overflowed in his mouth, intoxicating. Cheap old father opened an account for him. The income from several houses has been transferred to his account. He has money now, hee. Taking advantage of the cafe's good environment, he spread out the letter paper he had just bought on the way and started. Dear Mr. Klein, Chapter 34, A Letter. Saturday evening, Tingen. Klein, your letter. Melissa, who had just returned from school, waved the letter in her hand at Klein, who was peering out from the kitchen. Her tone was subtle. It is, from Wulian Yassos. Why that reaction? Do you know him? Klein asked his sister curiously while busy cutting potatoes into small chunks for stew. He had picked up the previous letter from Wulian himself, so Melissa shouldn't know the name. He is the person who gave me a 2-sol tip that day. Melissa pursed her lips, feeling uncomfortable that, Wulian Yassos is an acquaintance of my brother. I wasn't quite sure of his name back then, so I didn't mention it. Is this young gentleman addicted to giving away money? Klein thought with amusement. Regardless, Wulian hadn't shown any malice lately, so there was no need to be vigilant about everything. Ahem, of course, performing a divination before opening a letter is the most basic professional standard, and it has nothing to do with being vigilant. Well, nothing at all. After dinner, back in his room, Klein performed a routine divination and carefully opened the letter from Backland that promised a good result. A banknote, smelling of ink, fluttered and landed on the table. Klein stared blankly at the stern face with distinct Augustus features, his brain suffering a momentary crash. 10 pounds. Is it that easy to make money in Backland? This was Klein's first thought. Did something happen to Wulian? He immediately thought of this possibility. It wasn't his fault for overthinking. Suddenly giving so much money, the weirdness was on par with a death row prisoner's extra lavish, last meal. Don't rush. Klein took a deep breath to calm his thoughts and unfolded the letter that had been lying quietly to the side. Dear Mr. Klein, long time no see, although it hasn't been that long. The weather in Backland is quite terrible, visibility is very low, especially at night, but St. Samuel's Church is truly beautiful. There is food from all over the world and many novel items here. If you come to Backland, I highly recommend the Shin's Dixie Pie, the Silai Roast Meat, and the Red All restaurant. This city has steamed subways, more public carriage lines, and much higher rent. If you come here, perhaps you could contact me to find a suitable place to stay. Time to get to business. Surprisingly, Mr. Sisama, Thiesword of the Goddess and a senior deacon of the Holy Cathedral, gave me the option to join the Nighthawks. I am now a subordinate of Ms. Daly and am receiving training from other colleagues. However, I noticed from my colleagues that they don't seem to have grasped the acting method. But Ms. Daly's attempt to digest the potion is feasible. Perhaps you could try to reveal the acting method to the colleagues around you. This at least won't be a bad thing, right? As for the reason, you can look at the 3rd page. That is where I leaked it, and that page is the reason you know about the acting method. I've enclosed some money with the letter. I was too lazy to find an excuse, so feel free to use it however you like. Wishing you and your family and friends all the best. Sincerely, Wulian Yassos. The handwriting was as clean and neat as always. However, this upright appearance, plus these advanced sentence structures, why does it feel like writing an English composition? Klein recalled the not-so-pleasant memories of his student days and muttered softly, the previous tutoring didn't show much, but upon reading this kind of long expression, he had the illusion that he was Li Ming. Also, what does too lazy to find an excuse mean? Are you not even pretending anymore, Mr. Wulian? Klein followed instructions and turned to the 3rd page of the letter. The content was more or less the same as before, only it explained the acting method in detail, and the wording was more concise and polite. Of course, it didn't mention the money at all. It just so happens that tomorrow is a workday. He sighed. Benson and Melissa both had free time tomorrow, while he, on his Monday holiday, still had to spare half a day to lead a cult organization, The Gap Between People. While sighing, Klein picked up the brand new, crisp banknote with a light touch, folded it carefully, and added it to his private stash. Wild private savings have increased. The next morning, Klein, carrying the deliberately written letter, arrived at the familiar Blackthorn Security Company. There were several new faces at the Blackthorn Security Company during this period. The captain said they were a team of Red Gloves, elite members of the Nighthawks, specifically responsible for hunting down roving villains. Given the situation Tingen was facing, their arrival was not surprising. However, Klein had expected the reinforcements to be Al and the others. After all, it was those Nighthawks from Backland who helped when they fought Riel Bieber before. Never mind, this didn't seem to have much to do with a weak clerk who was still digesting the seer potion. Knock, knock, knock. After greeting the sleepy Roseanne, Klein knocked on the door of Dunn's office lightly and steadily. With a click, the door opened. The bookish young man raised his hand to adjust the brim of his hat and smiled politely at the gentleman with a helpless look in his eyes. Captain, I received a letter. Wulian was in a very good mood now. Quite good. Especially good. Our great and hard-working Ms. Daly was on duty at the Chinese Gate on Sunday, so naturally, she would also have a holiday on Monday. As for himself, 2 days off. Although he still had to go get beaten up by the poetry lovers in the afternoon. Awakened by the tale of that debt-collecting weekend, Wulian, voluntarily, got up early, poured her some pet biscuits to satisfy her craving, and went to the kitchen to boil the chicken breast he bought last night. Speaking of which, Backland really has honest folk customs. Yesterday, the lady selling chicken saw the bruises on his skin and asked with some pity what happened. Then Wulian made up a dramatic story about childhood sweethearts who turned against each other, parted ways, and got into a big fight. Although it was in the 3rd person, the origin of the scars on his body seemed to become clear in the lady's eyes. The Wulian who was dumped by his little childhood sweetheart, and lost the fight, received a few pieces of meat as a friendly gift from the satisfied lady and walked home swaying quite contentedly. Spreading rumors only about himself. I really am a good person. No, it was clearly, I have a friend. After soaking the boiled chicken breast in cold water, Wulian helped Weekend tear the meat into thin strips, while secretly calculating the possibility of the fortune-telling master re-emerging in the world. He would get investigated. Besides, there are many more capable people in Backland than in Tingen. Although his small seal script is very different from Russell's writing, as a single-character script, it is still too eye-catching compared to word-based languages like Lonus or Intis. Not suitable. I remember. Miss Assaulted Fish joined a circus to act as a trickmaster. Wulian glanced at the trench coat hanging at the door, where a ring with a small opening was placed. "Ah, I've been in Backland for several days, and I haven't been to the East Borough yet." He muttered to himself unhurriedly, the corners of his lips curling up, his expression faintly expectant. "Let's go for a walk." Chapter 35, Compulsory Education Enthusiast. Backland, East Borough. Wulian did not like this place. The smell of oily grease, the stench of sweat, the scent of soot, and the faint, lingering odor of urine. All these scents steamed and fermented in the sweltering summer heat, congealing into an even more indescribable, stifling stench. Wulian even considered inducing a hallucination to escape reality, but in the end, he was only grateful that his sense of smell was among the senses dulled by his glasses. And, it wasn't just the smell. The street he was in was crowded with people, yet it felt utterly lifeless. People wore pale complexions, with weariness and exhaustion etched onto their gaunt cheeks. No, that wasn't just the toil and fatigue of the corporate slaves of later generations. If the laborers of the future were zombies, then these people jostling shoulder to shoulder were more like corpses. East Borough, this was the East Borough. Among the passers-by, most wore ragged work clothes or trousers of equally coarse material, durable and stain-resistant, but stripped of any softness the fabric might have once had. Even so, areas subject to frequent friction, like their elbows and knees, were covered in layer upon layer of patches. Wulian adjusted the linen shirt he was wearing. It was still too clean. The environment here might be of no benefit to a marauder, from the perspective of monetary value. But if one considered the level of attachment, even if he stole a penny's worth of black bread or a few placebos, provided by free clinics, it could cause a family to struggle to survive, plunging them into a miserable state of collapse. Should he try? This seemed quite interesting. In an absurd world where a small bag of pet treats could sustain an adult human for half a month or even longer. But that would be too lacking in challenge, right? Wulian said to himself, soothingly stroking the plain ring on his little finger. He was already getting used to comforting his darkened self. Besides, he didn't come to the East Borough for sightseeing. Clang, clang, clang. A grand bell toll echoed from afar. Wulian followed the sound, looking toward a patch of pure black within his line of sight, his eyes and brows suddenly curling into a smile. As expected, a vast region with a population of over 1.35 million would not be without churches and gods. How nice. He strolled leisurely through the crowd, dodging a few small, targeted hands, while the weight in his pocket became slightly more substantial. Stealing. You guys need to be smarter about it. Tisk tisk. Eventually, the young Nighthawk trainee arrived before the church named Silence. There was no square or pigeons here. Perhaps it was out of fear that the not-so-wealthy believers might have an extra meal. After all, the Holy Communion of the Church of the Night was bread and water, not roast pigeon. While the little voice in his heart was still making malicious jokes, Wulian himself had already passed through the corridor with stained glass windows, arriving at the grand prayer hall, where a sense of peace diffused through the dimness. He closed his eyes and offered a simple prayer amidst the bishop's sermon, then rose almost silently to find a member of the clergy standing in the corner of the hall. "Sir, excuse me." The young man spoke in a very soft voice, wearing a student-like, obedient smile. "May I ask, do you need a teacher for a free school?" "Mama, a new teacher came to our school." The thin, petite girl huddled in the corner, mending her fraying clothes, rambling on to the woman who was pasting matchboxes, sharing the trivialities of her life. She had wanted to say it when she returned last night, but her mother had been too exhausted and had fallen asleep, so she had to save the words for today. The woman's work did not pause for a second as she casually picked up the conversation. "What is he like? Did you drink your porridge?" "I did." The girl answered with some excitement. "He is very good looking. And he wears glasses." Yes, that's the word, he's even taller than Vogel. He said that students who do well can get a small bag of candy." "Oh, that's nice." The woman deftly scooped up a glob of paste. "Do you have any?" "No, not yet." The girl lowered her head, discouraged, and accidentally pricked her fingertip with the needle. Fortunately, the tip was very blunt, so she wasn't hurt. "By the way, Mama, do you know about Santa Claus?" "Santa Claus? What is that?" The woman's movements paused suddenly. The price of black bread had been unstable in the last few days, and she didn't know if today. "It's someone who can make wishes come true." Before the girl could finish, she saw the woman hurriedly pat her chest, then walk quickly out of the room. "Rika, remember to take the matchboxes I finished to Nadal. Damn it, 2 pennies per gross, don't you forget, you hear?" Rika responded reflexively, then immediately muttered in a low voice, "I hadn't finished talking yet." Oh, Teacher Wulian said that Santa Claus runs all over the world, making the wishes he can come true. He must have a lot of shoes. Otherwise, they would wear out. After helping her mother deliver the matchboxes, Rika saw that their room was still empty, so she very obediently finished mending her clothes and continued the work of pasting matchboxes. What wish should she make when she saw Santa Claus? A big meal with meat. To taste that kind of cake with cream and jam. Or maybe 10 baskets of pasted matchboxes. Oh, Santa Claus would have to paste for a day and a half, would he refuse? Until she actually saw Santa Claus, Rika still hadn't decided. Little girl, make a wish. The Santa Claus, with a red nightcap and a long white beard, squatted in front of Rika, round and plump, like a giant ball. Thinking of this, Rika giggled. Stop laughing. Your mother is still waiting for you to go home. Wulian urged with a hoarse voice, feeling a wave of helplessness in his heart. Was his new look that funny? Why was everyone? I want to eat egg. 10 baskets of pasted matchboxes. Rika changed her words on the spot, staring nervously at the strange man in front of her. Or 7 baskets. Can you carry them? Wulian ruthlessly pointed out this problem. I can't. Rika twisted her fingers and thought of another. Good idea. Can you take them to Mr. Nadal? 2 pennies per gross, don't forget. Okay. Wulian was taken aback. Didn't they pay 2¼ pennies per gross on the lower street in Tingen? Right, there were too many people in the East Borough, so many that labor was worth even less. That seemed reasonable. Rika was surprised to find that the chubby Santa Claus in front of her suddenly started laughing in a low voice, his big belly shaking, which looked very comical. Child, Santa Claus offered a suggestion. Why don't I just give you 20 pennies directly? Rika thought about it and nodded her little head, accepting the proposal. I know how to count. Don't lie to me. I certainly know you know how to count. Wulian complained in his heart. You little ones are so good at counting, yet you just can't grasp the conversion between souls and pennies. Would you believe that if I gave you 1 sol and 8 pennies, you would still chase after me for the remaining 11 pennies? Santa Claus very readily gave Rika 4 5-penny coins, at least this way she could add them up to the correct answer bit by bit. Watching Rika skip away, Wulian sighed and followed behind this troublesome child, keeping a lookout for the thieves and vagrants passing by. A mask, a fake beard, a nightcap, and a fake belly. Oh, and a story called Santa Claus. Who said that deceiving children isn't still deception? Wulian returned to the room he had rented temporarily to change out of his costume, rubbing the ring on his little finger a few times, lamenting that he was getting along well with this guy now, as it hadn't harbored any malicious thoughts despite him wearing it for so long. Afterwards, this kind and respectable enthusiast of compulsory education left the East Borough, leaving behind only some thieves and pickpockets who didn't know why their joints were dislocated, whining in pain. Good night, Backland. Chapter 36, Swindling According to the Law. In the afternoon of late August, Wulian arrived at midnight him, as usual. Hi, little Wu. Berg waved at Wulian, who had just stepped into the foyer, with a beaming smile, completely devoid of that cold, indifferent feeling typical of a corpse collector. It's not convenient to act like this, is it? Wulian thought to himself, helplessly accepting the nickname given to him by the brothers. Good afternoon, Mr. Berg. This young man, who also had warm brown curly hair and stardust-like freckles, winked and seduced him. Little Wu, do you want to skip class for once? Wulian, who was already prepared to be beaten, felt his heart skip a beat. He peeked around sneakily, and sure enough, Luoluota and Borgia were both absent. Is there a mission? Wulian asked, his tone nearing certainty, his voice rising uncontrollably at the end. That's right, are you in? Berg looked exactly like a villain coaxing a child. Perhaps I might even need your help. And just like that, Wulian was swindled away. I am so stupid, really. I only knew that if they called me, it certainly wouldn't be a dangerous mission, but I didn't know. Oh my god, you bunch of liars, scoundrels, murderers. The old lady nagged, pointing fingers at the awkwardly smiling Ham, while Luoluota, who had escaped the fate of being nagged, looked quite uncomfortable standing on the side. This lady has been outputting for an hour. Berg crouched by the door, lowered his voice, and gave a wry smile to Wulian, looking somewhat helpless. The matter was actually not complicated. Ms. Luolisi's husband, Ace Redley, was an excellent university lecturer, and also a law-abiding reader. He had hidden this secret very well and had not attempted to advance throughout his life. Everything should have dissipated with his passing. But he just had to manifest. We initially suspect that the silver pendant Ace left behind is a sealed artifact capable of retaining the spirit of the deceased, so naturally, we need to recover it. And there is also the work of Requiem. So, to this old lady, the Nighthawks are peerless villains who want to snatch the relics of her late husband and make Ace's soul completely dissipate. Wulian rubbed his head in a headache. Then, what did the old lady hear? That he is resting in peace in the goddess's kingdom. Berg sighed, but Ms. Luolici feels that Ace is living just fine and refuses to cooperate. It's not that there are no forced measures, but if it's not necessary, it's best not to use them. In fact, Ace's spirit hasn't done anything out of line. Even his lingering was revealed by this lady in the church confessional. Is that so? Wulian pondered, suddenly stepping forward and knocking on the door 3 times, not too heavily or too lightly. Excuse me, is Ms. Luolici in? The dense, rapid-fire sound inside the house paused, then turned into an unfriendly inquiry. And who are you? Wulian Yassos. Your husband once taught a girl from my neighbor's house. Her name is Belle. Do you have any impression of her? She sent New Year's gifts to you too. Wulian's voice was smooth and bright, carrying a sense of approachability. Hey, isn't it normal for a swindler to have an affinity bonus? Oh, yes, there was such a girl. The old lady's voice was hesitant, but she also remembered this non-existent Belle. Ace had been a teacher for decades. How could there not be students sending New Year's gifts? And whether it was the teacher or his partner, they probably wouldn't want to disappoint such a thoughtful student. As for whether she really remembered, that was the least important thing. The door, which did not have good soundproofing, finally opened to Wulian. The young boy smiled with curved eyes, and with his clean attire and scholarly appearance, he looked particularly likable. Good afternoon, Ms. Luolici. Wulian bowed gently. I'm sorry to bother you. Oh, do you have guests? Sorry to disturb you, he exclaimed dramatically, looking panicked and at a loss, which caught Ham and Luoluota, who were looking over, off guard. Don't mind them, a bunch of scoundrels with bad intentions. Ms. Luolici was still very unhappy, but her tone softened significantly when speaking to Wulian. What are you here for, child? Wulian smiled shyly at Ms. Luolici, suddenly stepped forward, and gently hugged the old lady. The old lady was not tall to begin with, and due to her age, she had shrunk even more. Thus, the boy's thin frame actually wrapped her up well, as if giving her a long-absent reliance. Sister Belle is very worried about you, Wulian said in a low voice. She hopes you can live better. She knows that Mr. Ace has already. No, child, the old lady's voice trembled, and she pushed the child in front of her away in a flurry, her mottled palm subconsciously touching the silver pendant at her neck. I'm fine, child. I'm alone, I'm fine, very fine. Wulian's gaze fell softly on the old lady, filled with admiration and pity, stinging her heart. But he only said, that's good, madam. The boy brought a well-behaved smile, tilted his head slightly, and said goodbye to Ms. Luolici. Thinking about it, Mr. Ace is already on the road to reincarnation. Perhaps, you two still have a chance to meet. What did you say, child? This time it was Ms. Luolici who grabbed Wulian. She was flustered and even suspected she had misheard. Wulian seemed to have just realized his slip of the tongue. His hesitant gaze crossed Ms. Luolici and cast towards Ham and Luoluota, who seized the chance to leave as if granted amnesty, and Ms. Luolici clearly had no mood to stop them. This is a theory, or rather, a secret. Wulian's eyes glimmered with fine light, turning to spread a sincere color. After a person passes away, those without attachments will sleep in the goddess's kingdom, while those with thoughts will be reincarnated and return to the side of the people they miss. Walking a short distance along the way back, Wulian was not surprised to see his 3 colleagues. Mission accomplished. He smiled brightly, the silver pendant with an antique design lying quietly in his open palm. Your theory, Luoluota frowned slightly, sounds like the numinous episcopate's talk. Black cat, white cat, a cat that catches mice is a good cat, Wulian said nonchalantly. The result is good, that's enough. All right, thanks to our little Luoluota, it wasn't you who got scolded to death. Ham accused Luoluota half-jokingly, turned his head, and whistled at Wulian. How about a big meal tonight? No need. Don't worry, I'll find a restaurant that allows cats to be at the table. How about Reader? Hey, it's settled. Seeing that Ham didn't leave him any room to refuse, Wulian had to nod. Fortunately, this guy Weekend was much more socially adept than he imagined, yearning for freedom and having gone out a few times under his care. Otherwise, he guessed the cat wouldn't have been stressed, but he would have been stressed first. The cost of a meal wasn't much. Well, just treat him back later, no need to worry about it. Right, no need to worry. Chapter 37, The Uninvited Guest. September, Backland. As the days went by, Wulian entered the prestigious institution where many talents of the Kingdom of Loan gathered as scheduled, Backland University. It was also located in the North District, only a half-hour subway ride from No. 23. Pesfield Street. Harboring some small secrets, Wulian naturally chose to commute. With many classes today, Wulian barely managed to leave school by evening. Carrying bags of fresh ingredients, he returned to his residence, soft stewed potato and meat paired with fluffy oat bread, plus a pot of still safe creamy mushroom soup. It should make for a decent dinner. He pushed open the door, and the thin afterglow of the sunset rushed in through the crack, yet it failed to illuminate the leisurely figure leaning back on the sofa. "Yo, old man is here," Wulian asked with a casual smile after a brief startle, as if Xiao Asos wasn't the type to launch a sneak attack without a word of greeting. "Why haven't you turned on the lights?" In the shadows, Xiao Asos looked pale, but once the lights were on, the man presented before Wulian was still that same grinning, thin man. "I missed you, and happened to find a place to hide from trouble. How's that for an answer?" Tisk, not much sincerity in that. Wulian curled his lip imperceptibly and went about preparing dinner. Considering Xiao Asos's presence, he added a dish of bacon and fried eggs that was meant for breakfast and pan-seared a plate of chicken breast. Xiao Asos just sat on the sofa sipping cold tea, watching Wulian's movements with a smile, while unidentifiable emotions occasionally flickered in the depths of his eyes. "All right, time to eat." Setting aside a small plate of unsalted chicken mixed with egg yolk, Wulian brought the remaining dishes to the table and called over his cheap old father, who didn't seem inclined to help at all. "This guy, he didn't even think to send a telegram ahead of time. He gave me a real fright when I walked in. Truly an uninvited guest. No, he's the landlord, so maybe he's an uninvited host. Your skills have improved again." Xiao Asos forked a piece of potato, the soft, waxy potato melted in his mouth, slightly sweet with a hint of meatiness, tasting quite rich. The beef, which had been pan-fried beforehand, had a slightly charred surface. The aroma of meat and oil exploded alongside the tender texture, bringing out the full value of the spices. The other dishes were equally delicious, making one's mouth water and appetite soar. "Maybe it's just because you haven't eaten anything good in a long time," Wulian muttered back, licking the soup from the corner of his lip, secretly marveling that his skills were indeed quite excellent. Is this the legendary, sending out a student today, and getting back a chef tomorrow? Speaking of which, you've been in Backland for so long, and you've only sent one letter home. Xiao Asos, having eaten and drunk his fill, suddenly dropped this accusation, leaving Wulian stunned for a moment. "Huh, family letters. How many was I supposed to write? Oh, ow, I've been quite busy lately." Wulian brushed it off with an excuse. Hey, he wasn't the real son, keeping up appearances was enough. But Xiao Asos looked like he really wanted to be a good father. He suddenly started acting up, bombarding Wulian with concerns, whether he was adjusting to Backland's climate, if he was comfortable in the house, if he was being mistreated at school, if the potion was making him feel unwell. "Old man, just say it, what's the matter?" Wulian cut off Xiao Asos's chatter, unable to take it anymore. Heaven help him, based on his memories and observations, this cheap old father had never been like this with the original owner. "I'm going to be staying in Backland for a long time." Xiao Asos looked at Wulian expectantly with a pitiful face. "Good son, won't you take me in?" "Wulian, what are all those house keys in your hand for?" "Paperweights to add weight." In short, number 23, Pesfield Street gained another old man looking for a free meal. "So, little Wulian," Ham said, idly flipping through the newspaper in his hand, "your father is here, and you don't even want to go home." "That's not it." Wulian put down his fountain pen and shrugged helplessly. "It's just telling an adult not to meddle in a child's business and to go stay wherever it's warm." "Wherever it's warm." Ham was momentarily speechless, but then became interested in what he was writing. "What are you writing? Homework? Or a novel?" Subra, sitting quietly to the side, secretly cast her gaze over. It's just an archaeological discovery." The corners of Wulian's lips curled up slightly, smiling like a tax evader. A very interesting piece of information. An Intis version of the summary of Harry Potter, with annotations in Russell's self-created script, but it happened to be a handwritten copy that was not in Russell's handwriting. Tisk tisk, lost material of Emperor Russell obtained. As a world-renowned IP from the modern era, the Harry Potter series and its spin-offs were known to almost everyone. It was surprising that Huang Dao hadn't done anything with it, maybe because it was too long and he was too lazy to copy it. However, Wulian wasn't doing this to gain fame as a plagiarist. Using Russell's name to create some historical legacy for the fifth epic was much better. Otherwise, where would he find a multi-talented, stylistically versatile namesake with a counterfeit-proof label? Give the world a little shock of academic fraud. Besides acting out the role of a swindler, and perhaps the subsequent cryptologist, Wulian also had a bit of personal motive for this material. Putting that Russian guy, ASG, aside for now, Xiao Ke and the goddess would most likely be able to discover the true author of this Harry Potter manuscript. Setting aside the goddess's status and authority, Roussel had been dead and buried for so many years, and this material was deliberately made to look like a copy by a later generation, so its authenticity would naturally be doubted by many. Thus, it was only a matter of time before Xiao Ke and the goddess realized the existence of a fellow countryman. Oh my, I have to say, the identity of an outer deity survivor naturally gives people a sense of kinship. Having stayed at midnight hymn long enough, Wulian rose with a smile to say goodbye, then immediately dragged the idle Xianlu Asos to East Burrow. East Burrow was a den of dragons and snakes, with countless thieves and thugs. Since he had a free bodyguard, why not use him? Xianlu Asos, so, you little heartless thing, coming here wearing such a nice set of clothes, are you trying to lure people in, or just trying to screw me over? Wulian looked down at the expensive clothes on his body, an exaggerated look of realization and regret appearing on his face. Then, he grinned foolishly at Xianlu Asos, as if feeling guilty about his oversight. Knowing full well that even a simple linen shirt would be slightly out of place here, Wulian had openly worn high-quality clothing and accessories. It was naturally intentional. For example, entrapment. A naive youth from a wealthy family, accompanied by a thin man who clearly looked like he couldn't fight, yet showing great kindness by taking out a thick wallet to give money to the poor children on the street corner. With all those buffs stacked, he was truly a fat sheep. Although the Marauder pathway remained glass cannons even at Sequence 6, Wulian didn't expect Xianlu Asos to take on a group of gang members alone, but he didn't believe for a second that the man didn't have some tricks up his sleeve for self-preservation. Idly twisting the plain ring on his pinky finger, Wulian handed a 5-sol note to a young pickpocket with a smile. The bait is in place. Chapter 38, A Logical Conclusion. As expected, the dumb and rich father and son were targeted. When the child who had taken 5 souls from Wulian led a swarm of Highlander to block them, Wulian and Benefactor's building appeared as if facing a formidable foe, treading on thin ice, cowering and trembling, nearly hugging each other to cry for help. Of course, they very cooperatively handed over all the valuables on them, a few copper pennies and 2 souls. The child, who had personally seen the thickness of Wulian's wallet, rubbed his eyes. Then his neck tightened, his legs dangled in the air, and he met a pair of fierce, bell-like eyes. I didn't lie to you. He really has a lot of money. It must be hidden. The child struggled to explain, but turning his head, he saw Wulian's fragile, how could you do this, look, acting so affectedly as if about to weep. A truly pitiable sight, a full 52 pounds, you took it all. That was my money for medicine, cough, cough. Child. Slander. Pure slander. At this time, a burly man not far from the two of them touched his trouser pocket with a hint of doubt. After a glance, his movements paused slightly, and he hurriedly stuffed it back and patted it as if to cover something up. Too late. Riley, what are you doing? A burly man, clearly a leader, squinted over with an unfriendly tone. Regardless of whether you did it or not, hand it over. This isn't according to the rules, Riley tried to argue, but several people around him faintly closed in, the sense of coercion being very thick. Just as these gang members were in a standoff, suddenly, Riley let out a tragic cry, my money. He clutched his mysteriously deflated trouser pocket, his suspicious gaze scanning the surroundings, and riding a sudden wave of anger, he punched the nose of the nearest person. Then, the development of the situation became quite interesting. Seeing a group of dark forces fighting fiercely, Wulian and his companion looked left and right, their expressions completely out of it, looking very much like outsiders. Oh my, they say Highlander are brave and aggressive, their tempers really aren't small. Wulian spread his hands, smiling quite innocently. Benefactor's building shrugged. As long as you're happy, by the way, aren't you afraid they'll realize and strip you of your clothes? They're quite valuable. Besides, a person who admits to carrying 52 pounds for a stroll is also valuable. Although there was obscurity to create illusions and stir emotions, the greed of so many people was hard to control. Wulian still had a beaming smile, but his hand quietly grabbed the corner of Benefactor's building's clothes. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. You two, stop right there. A Highlander's roar sounded. The two, who were already slowly backing away, instead turned their heads without regard for anything else and took off running. Old man, it's your turn to act. Wulian said with a grin as he ran, tilting his head to dodge a stone thrown by a resentful Highlander. You don't think of a way out yourself and expect me. Benefactor's building ran without changing expression or heart rate, still having time to nag his cheap old father. I have a way, but you can't be completely unprepared, can you? It's easy to be controlled by others this way, don't you understand? What if I could only get myself out? Or, he pulled Wulian into a narrow alley and quickly tapped the button on his right shirt sleeve twice. Almost instantly, their figures sank and disappeared into the hustle and bustle of the East Borough. Ah, cough cough cough. Wulian stumbled into the sewer, splashing a puddle of slippery filth. Under the dual effects of physiology and psychology, he couldn't help but dry heave. Fine, fine, since you have a mystical item of the apprentice pathway, why bother opening a door into the sewer? Pure social revenge, no, pure revenge against me. Levitation charm, scourgify, bubblehead charm. This damn Lord of the Mysteries world isn't humane at all, blah. Wulian was picking faults in his heart, feeling that the book, Lord of the Mysteries, was gray and dark from its main tone, and surely wasn't a script suitable for participating in. Oh, low-sequence weak and pitiful trash, mid-sequence random unboxing snacks, high-sequence Amen special gift pack. Huh, is this the treatment a transmigrator should have? Looking at Benefactor's building, who was strolling leisurely and calmly, not even his nostrils twitching anymore, Wulian felt he had to admit defeat this time. To drag him down, Benefactor's building didn't even spare himself. The little old man is ruthless enough, blah. Although Benefactor's building had only been here for 3 or 4 days, Wulian had really caused quite a lot of trouble by dragging him along for support. After various playful deceptions, the digestion progress of Swindler was quite pleasing. It had to be said, Benefactor's building was indeed a qualified teacher, if one ignored those pranks that fell on Wulian's head. Today was supposedly Benefactor's building's birthday. It happened to be Sunday, and Wulian rushed to the pastry shop at mealtime to pick up a pre-ordered birthday cake. Lowen's food was mediocre, but the desserts were quite brilliant, just a bit too sweet for him. The cream was delicate, the aroma of eggs and milk intertwined richly and fragrantly, and the jam and nuts were added without any hesitation. One bite was smooth and soft, the sweetness sinking into the spleen. Alright, that was Wulian's reason for hogging most of the cake. Anyway, Benefactor's building had already made a wish. Almost forgot, is your potion fully digested, my dear, little Wooly? After being full of food and drink, Benefactor's building read out that last nickname syllable by syllable as if settling accounts, smiling eerily at Wulian. Ah, it's the new year, no, it's your birthday, don't think about those things. Wulian said with a forced smile to help Benefactor's building calm down, his face full of the guilt of being caught by his cheap old father. Given that no. 23, Pesfield Street is not far from St. Samuel's Church, and Midnight Hymn is on Cicely Street opposite the church. Then it's quite reasonable for the sunny and cheerful Ham to put his arm around Wulian's shoulder, calling him, Little Wooly, and seeing him out, only to be bumped into by the passing Benefactor's building, right? To be honest, seeing Benefactor's building's nose crooked with anger, Wulian's first reaction was actually to laugh, but fortunately, he held it in. To change the subject, Wulian babbled about school matters. Things like noble children having many followers, club organizations being numerous, which senior associate professor had a spat with a student, which senior student went missing while excavating ruins. A pity, I haven't fully digested, Swindler, yet. Wulian sighed with a gloomy expression, we're going to the archaeological site in 2 years, and my current sequence is still far from being able to protect myself. Benefactor's building looked up at Wulian, I should have taught you the basic mysticism common sense. The higher the sequence, the stronger the spirituality, and the risk of losing control would instead rise linearly. Wulian knew this. At least a higher sequence makes running away faster. Wulian was bold despite being in the wrong, and even sneakily sized up his cheap old father. Dad, would you consider giving me the potion formula in advance? And the family accounts, land deeds, notes, materials, mystical items, and such, give me more, give me more. Benefactor's building looked at him with amusement. Forget the formula, I can even prepare the potion for you. As for wealth and Beander characteristics, if you need them, would I not give them to you? It was just a logical conclusion. As long as Benefactor's building was truly Wulian's father, even if he just considered himself Wulian's father. Wulian knew the wisest thing for him to do now was to tell Benefactor's building that his potion was fully digested, just yesterday. Then, he could logically take the cryptologist potion as a junior and move towards his goal bit by bit. But a gloomy unease swayed and grew in his heart, stretching out rustling tentacles, and in an instant, it ruthlessly strangled all his wishful thinking. Dolly said there was another spirit in his body, a spirit that was almost one with him. The shell of Wulian had a period of normal activity that was a blank. When facing Sisama's chanting, the piercing scream he heard was completely out of place with those meaningless noises. It all seemed explainable. But Benefactor's building, after all, was surnamed Zoroaster. Wulian never, or rather didn't dare to, trust Benefactor's building. Was he now a Prometheus? Or a further, dream stealer? Was he aiming for his shell, his spirituality, or his vitality? If Benefactor's building was determined to act, Cryptologist might be his best chance. He had taught it. The higher the sequence, the stronger the spirituality, and the risk of losing control would instead rise linearly. Basic mysticism, common sense. So Wulian had not fully digested the potion. Of course he wouldn't. Even if Benefactor's building Zoroaster wanted to take back this life he had bestowed upon Wulian, it would only be a logical conclusion. Chapter 39, Self-Preservation. Wulian believed he needed to protect himself. Ultimately, there were only a few ways to protect oneself: advancement, Beander items, and clinging to a powerful figure. To avoid attracting the attention of Xiao Asos, Wulian could only give up on contacting conventional Beander circles. So, it seemed only the Church of the Night and the Tarot Club were left as options. Not to mention whether the Church of the Night had the potion formulas for Cryptologist in subsequent sequences. At Wulian's current level, by the time he accumulated enough merit points to exchange for the formulas and materials, Xiao Asos would have already played him to dust. What would be the point of advancing then, on credit? Nighthawks don't do that. The Tarot Club, on the other hand, had a bright future. Alger Wilson, Audrey Hall, Derek Berg, and the others each had their own circles, and Xiao Kei's various encounters were worthy of his protagonist status. Wulian had originally planned to just throw caution to the wind and recite the fool's three-part description. But imagine this. Klein Moretti was still working and living as usual when he suddenly heard layers of illusory prayers. He waited until the dead of night with doubts, enduring mental pain to reach Saphira Castle, only to discover. Surprise. It was that super suspicious swindler, the sneaky money-giving enthusiast, Wulian. You see, Saphira Castle was Xiao Kei's foundation. When he discovered that he seemed to have been doxed on his private alt account, would he accept a friend request to listen to an explanation, or directly use his authority to kick the person out? I've always been, cautious and prudent. Wulian tried his best to suppress the curve of his lips, lightly coughed to cover his mouth, but a hint of amusement leaked from his eyes. If he didn't want to be blacklisted by Xiao Kei, the plan to rashly enter the Tarot Club was also declared bankrupt. Path exploration progress, 0%. Perfect. Despite saying that, Wulian still intended to struggle. After all, which path wasn't a perilous gamble? He found Ms. Daly. Good morning, Ms. Daly. He brewed coffee for her before she could move, then stood before her with an ingratiating smile, exuding the aura of, no good deed goes unpunished, either a thief or a scoundrel. What is it? Ms. Daly watched the little fellow in front of her with amusement, a lazy and relaxed smile on her lips. I think my father is very dangerous and should be locked up in Channy's Gate, Wulian said earnestly. Ms. Daly. Joke time over. Ms. Daly, as you know, my father Xiao Asos is a Prometheus. Wulian's gaze quickly turned serious. I suspect he has parasited me. You mean, that spirit? Ms. Daly reacted quickly. Yes, Wulian nodded. This doesn't conform to his sequence, so I believe he achieved a similar result through mystical items, talismans, or some other means. Ms. Daly pondered for a moment, then slowly shook her head. I need more corroborating evidence. When Krestia Sexisima examined my body and mind, I heard someone else's scream. Of course, that esteemed individual's chanting doesn't give anyone a pleasant feeling, but I lean towards it being from that spirit body. If it was indeed as he said, that extra spirit was not the remnant of the original host, not a turbulent phantom, but a living, conscious, long-dormant unwelcome guest. Besides that, Wulian gave a weak smile. I can't provide any more corroborating evidence for now. There was, of course, other evidence to support his view, such as the memory blank manipulated by someone, or Xiao Asos's eager anticipation for his advancement. But these either tied into Wulian's identity as an outsider, or were seemingly normal exchanges between a Beander father and son, none of which were suitable as grounds to persuade the Nighthawks. In any case, this is just a possibility, maybe I'm just too paranoid. Wulian exhaled a small, quick breath, winked at Ms. Daly, and a familiar gentle smile reappeared on his face. So, beautiful, respected, powerful Ms. Daly, are there any ways to accumulate merit points? The Cryptologist ability would be more useful for the Nighthawks team, wouldn't it? Wulian understood that what he was doing was extremely reckless. If Shi Enlu Asos truly achieved parasite with the background of a Zoroaster, this was likely at the level of a sequence 4 inches parasite, at least a weakened version of it. So, whether it was deep parasitism that controlled all thoughts of the host, or shallow parasitism that relied on the host's 5 senses, Wulian had already been exposed. What? The Evernight goddess's authority over secrecy. When Leonard Mitchell first became a Red Gloves, the goddess's church didn't manage to guard against Old Man Pallas Zoroast either. According to a simple and crude calculation, Shi Enlu Asos had a 1/3 chance of directly erupting and sending his unrelated biological son to his grave. The other 2/3 chance was to feign ignorance and act as if nothing happened. And Wulian's reliance was almost non-existent. The mystical items were given by Shi Enlu Asos, and their effectiveness would undoubtedly be greatly reduced when facing a strong Beander of at least sequence 6. Moreover, Hand of Oblivion and Obscurity were not powerful offensive weapons to begin with. The same applied to talismans. If he couldn't steal Beander abilities, Prometheus could also be considered weak, but their spirituality and cunning still far surpassed a mere sequence 8 inches swindler. Wulian admitted he had no talent in swindling and would probably be played for a fool by this crooked Zoroaster member. As for agility, gunmanship, movement techniques, and so on, Wulian gave a bitter smile. If he were to show off these in front of Shi Enlu Asos, even as a son, he'd be beaten like a grandson. So, what he could do, seemed to be only gambling. After grabbing a backland post at the midnight hymn and confirming that Xiao Ke had not yet become Little Shaw, Wulian greeted his colleagues as usual, leaving with a smile. His destination was No. 23, Pesfield Street. Shi Enlu Asos went to Backland. Leonard Mitchell was startled, but a sigh of relief escaped his heart. Yes, a few days ago. After all, he didn't show any problems. Dunsmith put away the registration documents on his desk. He had forgotten to organize them these past few days. What's wrong? Nothing. Leonard Mitchell shrugged. I'm actually relieved that a mid-sequence Beander like him is gone. Turning to leave Dunsmith's office, he subtly glanced at his colleagues in the recreation room, then slipped into the empty lounge along the corridor. Sir, old man, Leonard Mitchell called out softly, didn't you say last time that Shi Enlu Asos he? Can't you just be quiet? The old voice interrupted impatiently, followed by a sigh. His vitality was cut off. I don't know what method he used to prolong his life until now. Since he has already left here, why do you care about him? You said, he suddenly left Backland, was it for his son? Leonard Mitchell's tone was very serious, so serious that Shi Enlu Asos's departure didn't sound like he was going to look after his son, but rather, why he left, is that any of your business? The old voice sounded even more impatient, and for some reason, there was a hint of anger at his lack of ambition. If he's dangerous enough, I have to report it to the Holy Cathedral. Leonard Mitchell said as a matter of course, speaking of which, can Klein Moretti divine something like this? He seems quite familiar with that kid named Wulian, why aren't you talking, hey, old man? The lounge was silent. Chapter 40. Oh ho, it's over. Taking a deep breath, Wulian pushed open the door to No. 23, Pesfield Street. He would accept whatever he had to face. Nothing could surprise him anymore. Whether what appeared before his eyes was a forceful assault, a deceptive calm, or what the hell, is the cheap old father fighting with the cat master? Weekend's leg injury was mostly healed, and she was currently launching an attack on Benefactor's building with a charging momentum, her claws dancing until they left afterimages, her mouth emitting threatening low growls. As a mid-sequence Beander of the Marauder pathway, Benefactor's building was utilizing his agility enhancement to the extreme. His flying fingers and palms were evenly matched with the leaping Weekend, his walk-tossing like movements enough to rival a top chef. And as for the fuse of this battle, Wulian pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes, his clear brown eyes filled with question marks. Probably, maybe, perhaps, it was the jerky belonging to Weekend that was currently dangling from Benefactor's building's mouth. Benefactor's building sat dejectedly on the sofa, looking like his heart had been broken by his biased cheap son, withdrawing into himself like a large shriveled mushroom, with a damp atmosphere of continuous rain over his head. The victorious cat was in no hurry to enjoy the jerky. Instead, she was pleased by a mysterious sense of possessiveness, parading around triumphantly in front of Benefactor's building with a slightly limping gait, her tail held high, the purring in her throat never stopping, making her a furry engine. Wulian stared blankly at this surreal scene and asked hoarsely, Dad, why are you stealing Weekend's food? Benefactor's building felt aggrieved. I was waiting for you to come back on an empty stomach. That was the only thing in the house to fill my belly. 200 meters out the door and to the right is I was worried you'd be scared if you didn't see me when you got home. When did I become so clingy? Wulian's first reaction was that it was funny, but he suddenly froze for a moment, leaning loosely against the doorframe with a lingering, faint smile. Is it really a parasite? His tone was casual, as if he were discussing the pronunciation of an ancient Hermes language word. Why would he be scared if he didn't see Benefactor's building? Was it because of loneliness? Hardly. Corresponding to not seeing him, it was more likely that Benefactor's building had sensed Wulian's suspicion and chose to stay out of sight to give him a surprise, and to prevent him from bringing a group of Nighthawks back to corner him. As for just going out for a stroll, it wasn't impossible, but given the crisis of trust between this pair of cheap father and son, the possibility was far too small. Before explaining the situation, how about you make something to eat first? Benefactor's building said with a fawning smile. Buying something is fine too. Wulian. With the mindset that this might be the last meal between the two of them, Wulian simply dragged Benefactor's building to Lavery Restaurant, the expensive restaurant invested in by Earl Hall that served excellent desserts. Delicious. Gentlemen, your total consumption is 12 pounds. The waiter bowed slightly with a polite smile, his feet as steady as if they had taken root, conducting a silent urging. In fact, the way this father and son dressed could only be considered middle class. This wasn't enough for the waiter to directly refuse service, but a bit of vigilance and precaution still emerged from the details. All right. Wulian returned a proper smile as well, casually pulling out his wallet and opening it, his finger movements pausing slightly. Is Benefactor's building really this poor? Why is his wallet full of small bills? He cast an inconspicuous glance at his steady cheap father and reluctantly pulled out his own wallet. Very good, combined with Benefactor's building's change, it was exactly enough for one meal. A certain someone who handed over 10 gold pound every week cleared his throat to cover his embarrassment and gave the 12 pounds in bills and change to the waiter. No wonder people could work in high-end restaurants. The waiter maintained his smile, and you could even detect a hint of kind encouragement in that smile. We look forward to your next visit. The waiter led the two of them out of the restaurant. The two of us, huh? Wulian glanced at Benefactor's building. Benefactor's building squinted at him, smiling harmlessly. On the way back, Wulian didn't take the original straightforward main road, but instead wove continuously through various quiet alleys. Benefactor's building didn't seem to have any objections, following Wulian quite honestly and even offering him advice. This place won't do, there are still several households here. Don't consider this place either, it's too far from the 3 great churches. This site isn't bad, but the spiritual feedback isn't great, maybe it's some hidden ritual site. After picking and choosing, the father and son had already returned to No. 23, Pesfield Street. Here won't work either, Wulian interrupted tiredly. Otherwise, what about weekend? I see. Benefactor's building nodded submissively, his eyes flickering as he glanced out the window, the corner of his mouth curling into a sinister curve. He asked out of the blue, do you remember that you used to keep a cat? Wulian's mind went blank for a split second. It was finally here. As soon as Benefactor's building's voice fell, the original owner's memories, which had blurred into a mere outline, suddenly clamored as if boiling in Wulian's mind, expanding and vibrating until they surged forth in an instant, enveloping his entire consciousness. The perspective seemed too low, everything before his eyes was a dark, dense mass, and in a daze, shadows wove and stretched, reflecting sharp and slender outlines. Drip, drip, water, or blood. Wulian followed his instinct to look, only to find that what was melting and flowing like candled tears was not a liquid. It was a minced flesh of intertwined red and yellow, mixed with gray-blue fur, and floating with chunks of organs and flesh of ambiguous meaning. It wriggled and spread like a living thing, occasionally emitting a soft squelch. Wulian seemed to remember. He had kept a cat. A round blue cat. He was very naughty, liked to jump around, and wanted to touch everything he saw. Because of this, he often received punishments from the original owner and his father. Until that day, when he touched a bottle of potion that had been knocked to the floor. Did Benefactor's building steal the cat's out-of-control state? How could that be? Being able to preserve such an abstract thing was no longer something a dream stealer could achieve. A parasite? No, impossible. A demigod has countless ways to make contamination undetectable. Why would he get himself to the verge of losing control? This was far too unsightly, and a waste. A Beander item. No, that's not right. A Beander item of this level shouldn't be in the hands of a minor side branch. Who exactly is Benefactor's building? In the blink of an eye, Wulian's eyes regained their clarity, and he abruptly looked up at Benefactor's building, who was standing nearby. He hadn't lost control because of the memories gifted by the other party. And the church should have noticed by now. He stared fixedly into Benefactor's building's deep brown eyes, which held no panic or surprise, only a playful, even mocking smile. Benefactor's building clapped his hands in a casual and elegant manner. "Why don't you try pulling the trigger of the revolver in your pocket?" he said with great interest. "After all, I am just a fragile Prometheus." Wow. Wulian remained expressionless. This way of watching the fun without caring about the consequences. This extravagance of throwing out two avatars at once. This extreme wicked sense of humor. Who could it be? He watched as the other party adjusted his right eye socket and slowly put on a monocle crafted from crystal. So hard to guess. He pulled out the revolver from his pocket in self-abandonment and emptied the cylinder at the other party as if venting his anger. The bullets vanished silently as they were fired, and even the sound of the shots was naturally snuffed out. "Isn't that right, Mr. Amon?" Wulian pulled out an exaggeratedly bright smile. "Oh ho, it's over." Chapter 41. Intimidation from the author. Amon, I've given up. Just let it all be destroyed. Wulian wondered, as a mere swindler, himself and with a cheap old father, who was a mere Prometheus, besides that cursed surname, what else was worth Amon's attention? To put it bluntly, the two of them combined wouldn't even be enough to fill the gaps between Amon's teeth as a snack. If I had known, I would have withdrawn more money earlier to taste that legendary 82 Lafite, no, Ormir red wine. Fortunately, he had planned ahead and opened a window for weekend to let her go play elsewhere, otherwise, another person would have been dragged into this. "This, sir," Wulian tossed aside the useless revolver and slumped onto the sofa like he had no bones. "When did you parasitize the two of us?" "Always." Amon smiled brightly, but Wulian was covered in goosebumps. No wonder, even though it was a blue cat the original owner had kept a long time ago, Amon still preserved those memories of losing control. But if that's the case, from the moment something went wrong with the original owner to his own transmigration into the book, Amon hadn't noticed anything unusual. That shouldn't be right. Unless Amon was lying, or he couldn't probe or grasp the specific situation of Wulian. Is that possible? As for the possibility that he and the original owner were so identical that Amon couldn't tell them apart. That's not right either. After thinking to himself for a long time, Wulian finally deigned to look up at the Amon in the form of Benefactor's building. "Forgive my boldness, but are you enjoying your parasitism? Or rather, have you found the fun you were looking for?" Seeing the little toy before him bounce around unexpectedly a few more times, Amon couldn't help but say with interest, "You seem to know me very well." Of course. The god of mischief and deceit, the sole member of the Amon family, the second son of the ancient sun god, Adam's good brother, dear son, an old brat, the universe's top-tier pleasure seeker. Other things were hard to say, but when it came to what kind of fellow Amon was, Wulian felt he had a tiny bit of authority to speak. Oh right, he had also subtly mentioned Adam. At a time like this, trying to turn the situation into a complete mess might actually create an opportunity to escape. And, to test the waters a bit. After all, there's a famous saying, the air is filled with Amon, and the corners are full of Adam. As an elder brother on the same level as Amon, if Adam could hear his name and cast his gaze, then the dear angel of time, Amon would be purely putting on an act. With a soft sneer in his heart, Wulian was actually looking forward to Amon's reaction. He looked over openly, only to see the other party staring at him like he was watching a monkey, with a malicious sense of amusement. "Why should I answer? To better enjoy the joke at my expense." Wulian suggested a possibility indifferently. "Given the sequence gap between us, I shouldn't have the right to talk to you here. Based on the current situation, either you can't do anything to me, or you find me somewhat amusing and can't bear to slap me to death." He gave a shy smile. "I'll tentatively guess it's the latter. After all, I've always been humble." "Interesting," the monocle-wearing freak responded. That being said, Wulian felt it was quite possible that Amon truly couldn't do anything to him. After all, he hadn't experienced any memory loss so far, and for an Amon not to steal a toy's thoughts was something practically inconceivable, unless he couldn't. Even if he tentatively determined that Amon couldn't parasitize him deeply or steal his memories. Wulian still had nothing to rely on to escape his predicament. Please, he was already at his wit's end and gambling everything just facing the Prometheus Benefactor's building. Facing the encroaching Amon, if he didn't have the ability to deal with him, then escape was the only path left. Regardless of life or death. Wulian was suddenly very curious. Xiao had resurrected once when he first arrived in this world, and had emerged from the earth, again after the battle in Tingen. Later, during his growth, he gradually discovered that his resurrection ability stemmed from the advanced Miracle Invoker sequence, and learned of the goddess's arrangements and schemes from her. He wondered what would happen if a little shrimp like himself, from a higher level world, committed suicide. Would it be the end of everything? Return to the real world? Or, to put it in a more Chunabu way, expose his true form? What if he really was some kind of sealed outer god? Haha. Oh, you seem to be quite expectant. Eamon clapped perfunctorily as if humoring a child. You aren't waiting for someone to help, are you? Eamon, you're a good crow. Wulian nodded with a smile, then with lightning speed, cupped his hands around his mouth like a megaphone and shouted toward the sky. Adam, come and deal with him. Eamon tilted his head, looking a bit puzzled. I'm here. In the corner, a white-robed priest with a short beard spoke softly. It was unknown how long he had been sitting there, watching the drama from the front row and getting called out. JPG. Can you read my mind? No. Can he parasitize me deeply or control me? No. Do I count as an outer god? Yes. Does Wulian's death equate to me breaking the seal? Correct. With Adam present, Wulian very thickly brushed Eamon aside and heartlessly complained in his mind, Old Sun Mother's classroom is now in session. Actually, he was quite panicked. Adam answers every question. Adam and Eamon, the two brothers taking action together. This is the kind of treatment Xiao Ke only got in the later stages when he was stabbed by his humanity, and was about to become an Eamon Happy Meal. I should, probably, maybe, I'm just a sequence 8 inches swindler. His face had stiffened from smiling, and his heart felt a bit cold. Wulian rubbed his face and returned to an expressionless state. So, what is your purpose for coming here? Is it that my living is an eyesore, or my death is an obstacle? Give me a straight answer, please. I'm not a cryptologist, yet, my brain doesn't work that well. Adam still looked generous and gentle, his every move like a spring breeze, but Wulian only felt suffocated. Adam said, if you consent, I will bestow the effect of psychological invisibility and solidify it into your astral body. This will effectively protect those around you, preventing them from collapsing or dissipating due to looking directly at you. Even if I die. Wulian responded mockingly, respected Mr. Adam, you are the one who needs a grand plan to achieve promotion and deal with the outer gods, not me. When I have the opportunity to wait for a better offer, why should I seek my own death? Adam still looked at him calmly, his eyes unruffled yet clear as water, like an elder who knew nothing of the world, his entire being filled with a discordant peace. Suddenly, this godlike figure spoke, delivering what Wulian considered a despicable threat. Cruscha Sexissima, Daily Simone, Al Hassan, and the other Nighthawks. Adam smiled gently, they have been outside the door for a long time. And your cat? Wulian could no longer smile. Chapter 42, The Best Choice. Wulian roughly sorted out his thoughts. If Adam wasn't lying, then his uniqueness should be limited to his astral body, while the shell of Wulian had been a bona fide weakling from start to finish. It was precisely because of this that Adam's mind-reading in Amon's parasitism would only remain on the surface, to the point that two dignified Sequence 1 angels were hesitant to act against him for fear of damaging the vessel. Yes, he was just that little mouse. Wulian didn't think he could make much of a fuss using his life and death. Otherwise, once this matter was settled, would Adam and Eamon have to protect him like nannies? That was too unrealistic. It wasn't so much that they didn't want him to die, the two of them, mainly Adam, just wanted to minimize the losses brought by the appearance of an outer god. As a swindler, who possessed status but no power, it was inevitable that he would be molded and manipulated by others. If he refused to open his permissions to achieve psychological invisibility, then these two likewise had ways to steal others' perception of him, suggest to others that Wulian did not exist, or even use any means to seal him. It would just be a bit more troublesome. To have fallen into such a state. Wulian felt a bitterness in his mouth and squeezed out a self-deprecating smile at the mild-mannered Adam. In fact, they had shown mercy. From a consciousness level, as one of the outer gods, he shouldn't die completely. But Dolly and the others didn't know what kind of existence they were facing, and at this moment, they were already in a precarious situation. The goddess is currently trying to master the authority of death. Can she really cast her gaze and provide protection in time? Even if she could, this is a necessary sacrifice. The goddess would probably agree with this statement of Adam's. Let's talk about terms. Wulian narrowed his eyes. Speaking of which, he and Adam could more or less claim some fellow countrymen sentiment. He had very, very little, and if he could pry even a tiny bit from Adam, it would be a gain. It might not be very believable to you. I have no desire for possession or destruction regarding this world, and even entering here wasn't my intention. Wulian deliberately spoke about the transmigration ambiguously. If it was interpreted as an outer god breaking through the barrier, that had nothing to do with him. I can open the permissions you want. Until the terms were settled, Wulian wouldn't bluntly allow Adam to give him psychological invisibility. But I need Eamon to withdraw his avatars, and for the two of you not to move against me or the people around me for at least 2 years. Oh, and my cat. Promise this in a binding way. As for anything longer, that would be hard to say. In addition, Wulian stared at the Xiao Asos, who was starting to look bored. Please leave behind a parasite, Beander characteristic, the kind without Eamon in it. For Adam and Eamon, this was a good deal. A pleasant cooperation, everyone is happy. Probably. Bang. The door was shoved open, and Wulian shot out like a lit firecracker, only to be quickly restrained by 2 red gloves who had been waiting for a long time. Hiss. The youth gasped in pain and looked at the crowded group of Nighthawks with indignation and doubt. Before anyone could speak, he said impatiently, "No matter who you are, can you save my father?" He stopped breathing. "I don't know if he can still be saved, but I need to find a doctor, or let go of me, please, he's all I have." Xiao Asos. Crestja Sexisima said thoughtfully. Ignoring Wulian's struggles, he walked into the house of his own accord, checking the situation inside through the half-closed door. No trace of a spirit. His gaze fixed on Xianlu's body, which had already gone cold and was beginning to seep out a Beander characteristic. He has passed away. Sexisima turned his head, meeting Wulian's slightly unfocused warm brown eyes. What happened? Wulian was stunned for a moment, then slowly spoke as if gathering his thoughts. I don't know. I was sitting on the sofa when I woke up. Even though I was clearly in Tingen before, the room was very stuffy, so I went to open the window and saw my father lying by the door, already not breathing. There was a hint of a sob in his throat. I thought, even if he's not breathing, he might not be completely dead, maybe there's still hope, so I hurried out the door, and was stopped by you guys. You say, you suddenly came from Tingen to Backland? Sexisima asked in an inducing tone. Yes. Wulian's gaze passed over the crowd and toward the direction where Xianlu was. I am a student of Iwas Public School, just graduated. You can go to Tingen to verify it. He took a deep breath. Who are you? Plainclothes police, military agencies, or people from the church? I haven't come into contact with those supernatural things. You've got the wrong person. Sexisima's eyes grew deeper. Mr. Wulian Sorov, regarding your father's death and what just happened, we need your cooperation. Okay, Wulian said weakly. Spirit channeling, dream entering, applying for a sealed artifact to perform a scan. The results of various methods all pointed to the same thing. Wulian Sorov had lost all memory since becoming a Beander, and even his personality was somewhat different from what he had shown during this time. However, he was still a sequence 8 inches swindler, a harmless Beander whose potion had been completely digested. As for whether there were traces of parasitism, he wasn't worth the corresponding price for the Church of the Night to pay. Watching the youth, who had still been talking normally this morning, walk away in a daze, Dolly pondered and looked at Sexisima. Your Excellency, his current situation is unstable. Do we need to absorb him back into the Nighthawks? With the resistance he's shown, do you think he would agree? Sexisima's gaze seemed to be looking at something else through Wulian. Hey, the current him only has that dissipating spirituality remaining. Perhaps, the father and son both dying suddenly is the ending we were supposed to see. In other words, the only thing that disappeared was the Wulian, who became a Beander. Dolly closed her eyes wearily. Or rather, the one who disappeared wasn't Wulian himself, he hid it very well. The only thing worth being thankful for is that he still believes in the goddess. Sexisima was the first to turn and walk toward the bottom of the cathedral. Perhaps there's one more thing worth being thankful for. Dolly stood in place for a while, thinking about how to inform Al-Hassan and the others about Wulian's matter. As long as Wulian showed no signs of losing control, no one would want a former companion to become an experimental subject in the cathedral's basement. Click. Amidst the slight sound of mechanical operation, number 23, Pesfield Street turned from dark to bright. At that moment, a cat's meow, like a soft complaint, curled around Wulian's ear. Stroking Weekend's little head as she kept rubbing against him, Wulian smiled gently. Okay, it's fine now, be good. Oh my, it's fine now, I'm still lying right here. A sarcastic voice suddenly rang out in his mind. Wulian unhurriedly stroked Weekend, and only after feeling satisfied did he lazily respond. What, you old man, you have a point for parasitizing me. Cough, after all, you are my son, besides, I'm just stealing a tiny bit of vitality, just a tiny bit. Xianlu became more and more aggrieved as he spoke. I really have lost my wife and son. Who knew one of my rituals could attract an outer god? And it even made me die suddenly. It wasn't easy for me to use the family's Beander item to scrape some vitality from my own son to make do, thinking I'd hurry and advance after acting out. Prometheus. Dear father, can we stop mentioning that high-level knowledge? If you keep nagging like this, neither this shell nor your spirit will be preserved. Wulian stopped Xianlu, unable to bear it any longer. Don't worry, I've already contacted someone to collect the body. I'll bury you in a beautiful cemetery near the West District later. It's very expensive. The Prometheus Beander characteristic is gone, and other Beander items and materials have been stripped clean. Xianlu's tone sounded like he was about to have a heart attack, rambling as he took inventory of the things confiscated by the Nighthawks, making Wulian roll his eyes. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. I don't believe you don't have a backup plan. Xianlu, hee. After the explanation and banter, Xianlu's tone finally became serious. You still plan to operate under the Nighthawks' noses? Yeah. Wulian turned to handle weekend's dinner for today. After all, I couldn't leave Wulian's body behind. If I left directly, I'd definitely be wanted. Instead, in this situation, I can gamble on their mercy. See, I won the bet. It's more like you don't want to involve them, and there's something you can't let go of. Xianlu hit the nail on the head. Tisk. Wulian clicked his tongue in annoyance, then softened his expression toward Weekend. This is the best choice. Side Story 1. Lunar New Year Special. Happy New Year everyone. This is a completely non-rigorous little side story, so please leave your brain at the door. Equals. Press this button to advance to sequence 0 and gain a god level buff at the same time. Wulian squinted speechlessly at the mysterious text and button that had appeared before him. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Besides, where would the uniqueness and Beander characteristic come from? Will this vessel lose control after the advancement? And what kind of god level buff is it exactly? Nothing has been explained clearly. What kind of fool would accept? Weekend. Meow. Weekend, who was idly flicking her tail on Wulian's shoulder, expressed her confusion. You pressed it, forget it, so be it. Wulian closed his eyes in pain. Maybe I can run a bit further away before something goes wrong. No canned food for you for a whole month. Meow. Amidst the chaos of the cat jumping and the human shouting, the text in the button gradually dissolved into fine light dust. In the final, tiny footnote went unnoticed after all. Valid only for today. Happy New Year, wishing everyone a Happy New Year, Wulian hummed as he arrived at Narcissus Street. He squinted at the house numbers for a while before finally choosing number 2 and knocking on the door rhythmically. The height of his arm was perfect, the force of the knock was perfect, exactly 3 times. Not bad, very polite. He nodded in satisfaction. You are. The young man with a slightly high hairline looked doubtfully at the unfamiliar youth before him. Are you here to see Melissa? No, the youth said, hands behind his back, rocking on his heels with a beaming smile. I'm here to see Mr. Klein Moretti. Benson, who had just breathed a sigh of relief, tensed up again. What do you want with him? He's not home. Please. His brother needs to find a wife. Definitely don't. Mr. Wulian, what are you doing here? Klein, who had just finished preparing breakfast for the family, came down to check the situation. Seeing this, he greeted Wulian while casually pulling Benson aside. Benson grew increasingly desperate. Father, mother, Melissa, how am I going to explain this to you? Mr. Wulian, I think. Halfway through his sentence, Benson's mind suddenly went blank. Jolted by the cold winter wind, Benson shivered. What am I doing here? Melissa is still waiting for me to eat. The 2 siblings then happily enjoyed a hearty breakfast for 3. Benson, you fried the bacon perfectly. Melissa, you actually were willing to buy white bread. Cheers. The 2 raised their milk and clinked glasses in celebration. A world where only Klein was hurt had been achieved. The more Klein looked, the more he felt something was wrong with Wulian. Mr. Wulian, are you drunk? He asked tentatively. At that moment, Wulian was trying to pull him to the other side of the road in a tug-of-war stance. Wulian stopped his movements. Can't you see it? The light in his eyes instantly dimmed. He stared fixedly at Klein, his smile turning strained. See, what? The sense of strangeness in Klein's heart grew stronger. He was already thinking about how to notify Dunn. No, better to find Mr. Azek, but unfortunately, he didn't have the copper whistle with him. I understand. Wulian nodded. What do you understand? Mr. Wulian, do you really know what you're saying? Why is this so nonsensical? In this situation, maybe I should just run, but is there a way to get away first? I can't exactly shout, celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings, in front of him. If you can't cross over, then let's craft a fake one. Wulian sighed very, very softly. After all, my situation isn't quite suitable for going home. Go home. Why are you pulling me to go home? Klein complained inwardly, but then he met Wulian's earnest warm brown eyes. Your home is in Sichuan, right? Klein even spent half a minute thinking about Loan place names that sounded like Sichuan. But clearly, what Wulian spoke was Chinese. Hey, you brat, why don't you know how to host a friend when they come over? A light flick landed on his head. Zhou Mingrui instinctively held his head and shrank back. Dad, I know, I'm going right now, Dad. The kid slept himself silly, Oh my, why are you crying? You've been working for 2 years, don't be so sensitive. Did I hurt you? It couldn't be, I was gentle. Ow, 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 honey, I really didn't use any force. The man's voice shifted from panic to a wail, accompanied by the woman's complaints. The child is tired from work, let him sleep if he wants. Otherwise, go buy something delicious. Xiao Liang, keep eating your fruit. Auntie has chilled the yogurt too. Do you want some crispy pork? It's okay, Auntie, the fruit is enough. Wulian sat properly on the sofa, his eyes curved in a smile, looking well-behaved and likable. I still have to go home for the new year. I'm catching a flight later. I'll just chat with brother Mingrui for a bit and then I'll head out. Xiao Liang is from Shandong, he went to school here. I tutored him before, and he came to see me before leaving. Shandong, that's quite far. Your family must miss you a lot, right? They certainly do. Hearing the two chatting back and forth in the living room, Zhou Mingrui also dizzily gathered his thoughts and walked up to Wulian. Cough. Xiao Liang, shall we go to the study to talk? Okay. Gently closing the door, Zhou Mingrui looked at the still youthful boy for a few more moments and said hesitantly, I don't think I've met you before. Well, you could say that. The youth gave a mischievous laugh. I just wanted to say one thing to you. Happy New Year. Without waiting for Zhou Mingrui's reaction, he waved his hand nonchalantly and twisted open the study door. Auntie, uncle, I'm going home now. I wish you both good health and that everything goes your way, may all your wishes come true. Oh, you child, since you're here, why not take some sausages? I've already packed them. The sounds of pleasantries gradually faded. Zhou Mingrui was still a bit dazed. Suddenly hearing his mom calling his dad to help chop meat, he realized with hindsight that it had been a very long time since he had been able to hear his parents' voices. Listening somewhat greedily, he walked quickly toward the kitchen. Mom, I want to eat the red oil chicken pieces you make. You silly boy, which time you come back does mom not prepare that? The fish I steamed is clearly quite tasty too. Click. A red envelope slipped from his pocket and lay quietly on the floor, revealing a stack of festive red. Wishing you prosperity. Congratulations, on your return. Chapter 43, Even if we meet, we should not know each other. The first day of losing his official position. Wulian yawned widely without any regard for his image, wriggling a few times before throwing off the quilt, and lay paralyzed for a long time before he was willing to raise his hand to wipe the tears from the corners of his eyes. Last night, he had been tossed around by the Nighthawks for so many examinations, having to act innocent and cold, and after refusing their suggestion to help settle the body, he stumbled to find a funeral company to lay his cheap old father to rest. It really exhausted him. Although all the ceremonies were kept simple, Benefactors Building would definitely enjoy the top-tier services in terms of requiem and soul-soothing. At the thought of the Nighthawks having to secretly send someone to appease the soul of the former Prometheus, Wulian couldn't help but want to laugh. My dear, have you laughed enough? A resentful voice sounded in Wulian's ear. The tragic state of being at someone's mercy really made the filial son feel physically and mentally pleased. Barely satisfied, Wulian responded casually, his tone carrying a bit of disdain. Is there really no Beander item that can house your spirit body? Our Zoroaster family has a great business, but a Beander item of this level, at least I don't have one in my hands, Benefactors Building said dejectedly, then immediately started jumping in anger. You're looking down on me, right? Are you looking down on me? When Eamon left, he directly cut off my channel for absorbing vitality, otherwise why would I pay such a high price to parasitize your body? I'm not a pervert. Allowing the increasingly lively Benefactors Building to chatter incessantly in his head, Wulian's thoughts had already drifted to his first mission in the Nighthawks. Speaking of which, hadn't he previously coaxed, a pendant that could hold a spirit body from Ms. Luolisi? By now, its grade should have been determined and it would be sealed in the basement of some church. Mr. Al even said he'd credit him for it. Wulian sighed very softly, composed his mood, and got up to wash. At least his spirit body level was high enough. A simple expansion and wrapping could block Benefactors Building's sight and hearing. so he didn't have to worry about privacy issues. Even that parasite, Beander characteristic, which didn't contain Aemon, was contained within his spirit body, otherwise it wouldn't have escaped the fate of being confiscated by the Nighthawks. Pity, this swindler shell is still too fragile. If he forcibly consumed this sequence 4 Beander characteristic, Wulian would 10,000% lose control and collapse. He had no interest in becoming a pure spirit body for the time being. Today's main mission was to play the role of young Mr. Wulian, who had, suddenly, arrived in September and had just graduated from public school in his memory. Might as well just issue me a minor degree certificate for faceless. Wulian grumbled unhappily, bit by bit calculating and imitating the appearance a green and slightly clever youth should have when exploring a new life after accepting reality. When I buried my old man yesterday, I had already preliminary accepted reality, so no need to confirm the time again. When buying breakfast, hesitate a bit about the direction, don't take too many detours. Today is a workday, there's a class scheduled at home, it's an afternoon class, no rush. The contact with Xiao Kei's side also needs to stop for a while. Counting them down one by one, Wulian just wanted to do nothing and lie at home to sleep. Anyway, my cheap father is gone, I can observe mourning for 3 years. He spoke nonsense without guarding against benefactors building, and hearing the other party's grumbling complaints, the nameless fire in his heart subsided a bit. After forcing himself to remain calm, while interacting with teachers and classmates at school, today's social tasks were over. It's dinner time. Potatoes, beef brisket, pepper, carrots, chicken breast, rhubarb, cream. Buying things all the way, Wulian's sense of satisfaction became heavy along with the weight of the ingredients in his hands. Losing a father in a foreign land is already pitiful enough, not to mention he even lost his official position. Must have a big meal, Wulian's movements stiffened for a moment, but he quickly composed himself and walked toward the shop selling pastries with his head down. Fortunately, he remembered his expression management and didn't smile too overtly. Why was Berg here? He was supposed to stay at midnight today. Is there a mission? Or is he coming for me? Distractedly selecting a few sweet buns drizzled with honey, Wulian set off on his way home carrying the food. He saw Berg's eyes light up. He saw Berg's hesitation to speak. He heard that sleepwalking like, little Wooly. He walked straight past. He knew. They were meant to be strangers. Today's dinner was unsatisfactory, the rhubarb was too sour, the beef brisket was too salty, and he also forgot to add cinnamon powder to the cream soup. Silently chewing on the dry bread, Wulian felt inexplicably a bit angry. All right, isn't this something you were prepared for long ago? Benefactor's building comforted him gently. At least today's chicken breast was cooked tenderly, and your cat loved it. That was undercooked. Wulian responded gloomily, with a bit of a nasal tone. He's been a corpse collector for half a year, how does he still not know the acting method? I clearly hinted at it yesterday. He bit down fiercely on a piece of bread, sugar granules pattering onto the tabletop. If what's really making you angry is this, Benefactor's building's voice carried a bit of tenderness, go and take a look at number 125 Berlincar Street in the East Borough tomorrow. Wulian pursed his lips and squeezed out a smile of having gotten what he wanted. All right, thank you. Today I saw little Wooly at the vegetable market. How did he look? Pretty good. He bought a lot of vegetables and sweet buns, he should be able to take good care of himself. That's good then. Is he the only one left at home? Isn't there still weekend? Haha, yeah. Can we apply to monitor him for a while? At least not now. But fine. Did you find anything unusual in the area you went to? Didn't feel anything. Hey, same as always. It's the East Borough, after all. Sigh, just report it as it is. Maybe the higher-ups who learn of the situation can find a way to manage that place. What's wrong? Fortunately, little Wooly's financial situation is good, and finding a job after graduation will be smooth. Yeah, the further he is from those places, the better. Sigh. A faint sigh came, and Ham and Berg were slightly startled before they realized Luoluota had been leaning against the wall listening for a long time. You two might as well rush to know. 23, Pesfield Street to be nannies. Luoluota commented sharply. But my cooking skills aren't that great. Berg even considered it following her words. Berg, he's not your long-lost son. Besides, even if it's just muscle memory, the things we taught him are enough for him to protect himself to a certain extent. Luoluota was very rational. Our greatest care for him is to stop him in time before a problem arises. Any concern beyond that is of no benefit. In the future, when we meet, don't disturb him again. Ham gave a bitter smile. We are no longer in the same world. Chapter 44, Cryptologist. No. 125, Berlinker Street, Backland East Borough. Old Fox, so rich. Wulian stared wide-eyed at the row of colorful Beander materials and mystical items in the room, once again gaining some insight into the Zoroaster family's wealth. Here, there's exactly enough for a set of Cryptologist, Beander materials, just waiting to be mixed. Haven't you already digested, swindler? Advance right here. There are a few mystical items over there, not commonly used. Hey, wait, that hairband over there, yes, the black one, pick it up. Wulian examined the specifically mentioned hairband. It was made of silk, simple and elegant in design, occasionally interwoven with silver threads, appearing very soft and smooth. To be honest, it quite suited his aesthetic. What does it do? HMPH, this is my masterpiece. Benefactor's building was very proud. It was originally an ordinary hairband belonging to Derry, nothing special about it. But through my own cleverness, and a little help from the family elders, I stole the traveler teleportation ability and returned it to this hairband. At the same time, because it contains the astrologer sequence, it also has a certain boosting effect on spiritual intuition and danger premonition. A little help. To be able to process a sequence 5 Beander characteristic to this extent, I'd say it's more like a massive amount of help, right? Oh my, the poor apprentice pathway really is the hard currency of the Beander world. So, what are the negative effects of this thing? Wulian didn't think something so useful would be left gathering dust here, unless there was a huge catch. Quite fatal. Although he couldn't see Benefactor's building's expression, Wulian still felt the other party was winking at him. For most people. Speak plainly, Wulian said irritably, though he already had a few guesses in his heart. The longer you carry this hairband, the greater the possibility of spirit-body separation. And those who have used it will inevitably experience spirit-body separation within 3 hours. Once the latter condition is met, even if the hairband is taken away or sealed, the user will still face this predicament. As a tool for running away and saving one's life, if one isn't willing to carry this hairband long-term, its value is nearly zero. For most low to mid-sequence Beyonders, the spirit body is extremely fragile, and the act of returning to the physical body is definitely not easy. Plus, the risk of the body itself being uncontrolled. PFF'd. Wulian's eyes crinkled with a smile, finding the situation very interesting. Who told him he was a harmless outer god, and his physical body was dual sim dual standby, with Benefactor's building? The preparation of the Cryptologist potion was slightly more troublesome than Benefactor's building had said. After all, Wulian had been a good student for 2 lifetimes and had never really touched the craft of cipher design, and a set of self-designed ciphers happened to be a rather important auxiliary material for concocting Cryptologist. Morse code, rail fence cipher. Tisk, his knowledge of these subjects only stayed at the level of having heard of them, and he hadn't really upgraded his brain, so it was tough. However, combining the referential and displaced gameplay of these ciphers. Wulian's eyes darted around. Combining the thinking of a modern person, there was actually a quite clever way. Convert the meaning of the Loan language into Hanyu pinyin. Taking cat as an example, the letters of its pinyin, Mao, were located at different positions on a 9-key keypad. Using the numbers 5, 1, 2, 1, and 5, 3, one could locate them quite easily, that is, 512,153. If one wanted it to be harder to identify, a certain offset could be applied, appearing in a form like 633, 365, at least for someone who understood the rules. This interference wouldn't affect the difficulty of decryption. Wulian curled his lips in self-satisfaction, feeling like he was simply a genius. And our little genius. Wulian turned his head and saw a pile of Beander materials neatly arranged on the table. Among them, a grayish-white brain and a multi-eyed worm shrouded in mist were prominently featured. As the marauder pathway just obsessed with worms, Wulian struggled to look away, wanting to cry but having no tears. I say, are you sure you didn't get the potion materials wrong? Wulian carefully poked at the cup of mist that looked fierce and shimmered with crystal light, his face full of reluctant disgust. Hey, this is a potion you concocted yourself, the quality is pretty good, drink it, drink it. Benefactor's building coaxed his cheap son, otherwise, are you waiting to be delivered as a snack in 2 years? Even if someone's being delivered, at most I'll deliver you father and son out. Wulian wrinkled his nose, glanced at the potion again, gritted his teeth, and swallowed the thing. Besides, how could that overgrown brat give him 2 years? With a boom, Wulian's head felt like someone had ripped off a layer of skin, exploding into a chaotic ball of yarn toyed with by a cat's sharp claws. Memories belonging to alternate identity, the past belonging to Wulian, and the experiences of him at this moment were all spread out messily under the sunlight like pots and pans at a clearance sale, distinct to the point of being blinding. It hurts, 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 and also, is the sharpening set too high? It's all noise. Wulian complained at an inappropriate time, finding the shimmering scenes before his eyes as annoying as a revolving lantern. When it became dizzying to the extreme, his already aching head felt like a wound exposed to the air, rubbed with coarse, dull pain. My head hurts so much, I might be growing a brain.jpg. After an unknown amount of time, the throbbing in his brain vanished without a trace like a receding tide, leaving only a sense of clarity. Wulian blinked and found that his head was filled with much more mysticism knowledge, and the cryptologist potion seemed to have been partially digested. It seems he's been using his brain quite a bit lately. As for the sequences further up. Prometheus stole the fire of hope, so his own squatting might also count. Wait, it wouldn't have also boosted the digestion of parasite, would it? Dream Stealer might be the only potion that hasn't been pre-digested. Wow, am I really this gifted? Reaching, cryptologist, spirit vision, divination, and a series of rituals truly began to have meaning for Wulian. Pulling out a copper penny, Wulian muttered, I have an item on me that threatens myself. I have an item on me that threatens myself. With a clink, he tossed the copper coin high and caught it smoothly thanks to his agility bonus, tails. Old man. Wulian smiled with mischief, it says you're not a good thing. Benefactor's building. I'm dead, not stupid, he snapped back mercilessly. Besides, there might be something wrong with the mysticism knowledge you received. Do you still want me to take you back to the main family to get some benefits later? Yes, yes, yes. Wulian's face changed instantly. I knew you were my dear old dad, the dear old dad I share life and death with. HMPH. Benefactor's building went silent again. It was known that the Nighthawks had confiscated all the mystical items and Beander characteristics from No. 23, Pesfield Street. Not a single ordinary item of value was missing, and there were even £5 of cash extra. Then the missing gun black pocket watch was quite telling. After all, Wulian's pair of mystical glasses, which could only hide oneself, was still perched on his nose, so what reason would there be for an ordinary pocket watch to be taken away? Unless it was very dangerous, to others, or to Wulian himself. That pocket watch comes in a pair, doesn't it? Wulian scanned the small room. Your auxiliary tool for stealing vitality. It used to be, Benefactor's building said weakly. Anyway, after Eamon had his way with it, it's of no use anymore. What was the thing you mentioned yesterday that would help me, clearly show, Berg and the others? Here, the scented candle over there, or should I say, hallucinogenic candle. Benefactor's building said boredly, the way to use it is to pretend to light it. Just simulating the sound of ignition or giving a bit of light will do. If you can manage it, actually lighting it is fine too. Then, it will simulate the aura you expect and, after 1 minute, cause creatures within a range of about 20 square meters to fall into a dream, including the user. To end its effect, just close the cover or pour some water, this time it has to be real. Don't worry, even after being watered, it can still be lit again in a short time. No means of immunity. If I could be immune, why would I leave it here? Wouldn't it be better to keep it at home to guard against thieves? What about the negative effects? Isn't the negative effect of not distinguishing between friend and foe enough? So there aren't any, Wulian said lightheartedly. The rest of those mystical items. Go analyze them yourself. Alright. Tingen, Blackthorn Security Company. Strange, why did it get dark so early? Klein's gaze pulled away from the honest person's paper, looking at the scenery outside the window, subconsciously frowning. Indeed, it's clearly not time to get off work yet. Cohen Lee walked to the window and looked out. It looks like it's about to rain. I see, Klein nodded. Fortunately, at Melissa's strong insistence, he had kept an umbrella here, so he didn't have to worry about his expensive formal wear getting ruined by the rain. With the weight lifted from his heart, he also stood up and walked to the window, looking up at the falling leaves swirling in the air. The wind is picking up. Chapter 45, The Matter Settled. Wulian, do you really want to take such a long leave of absence? Lizelle looked concernedly at the student standing before him with his head bowed. The courses have only just begun. If you fall behind now, it will greatly affect your future development. You know, the workload at Backland University is quite heavy. If it's a family difficulty, the school has relevant charity funds. It's not related to that, Professor. Wulian smiled at the elder with soft blonde hair and light gray eyes. In fact, this incident has actually left me with a bit more money on hand. I just need to handle the inheritance my family left in Tingen. This is also so I can live better in Backland later on. As for taking a leave, I don't want to use it and eat away my savings for too long. Graduating a year late carries more risk, it's a bit too passive. Alright, Lizelle sighed with some regret. Then, I wish you all the best. Thank you for your care. Wulian bowed slightly, giving a sincere salute to this kind mentor. After greeting a few classmates he got along with while appearing slightly dejected, Wulian left the school. After several turns, he found that cafe-like room, warmly and elegantly decorated. Midnight Hymn. Today was quite a coincidence. Aside from Al Hassan, who was out patrolling the district, this Nighthawks team stationed at Midnight Hymn was rarely all present. Even the guarding of Channy's gate had been taken over by the church. Luoluota looked drowsy and listless, curled up like a cat on the soft sofa, boredly stirring the coffee in her porcelain cup with a silver spoon. The floral and fruity aroma, with a hint of bitterness, diffused richly in the sunlight, making the entire room feel soft and alluring. Subra held an open book of poems, but her mind was rarely on it. Her eyes were half lowered, her lips pursed, as she thought about something in a daze, her light golden curls shimmering in the afternoon glow. Opposite the two ladies, Ham was quietly flipping through a copy of the Backland Post, occasionally wanting to turn and say something, but stopping himself just in time. Berg, beside him, had just finished his shift at Channy's gate this morning and was now leaning bonelessly against his shoulder, still sleeping soundly. Compared to the other members, Borgia seemed to play the role of an elder. This gentleman leaned back relaxedly in an armchair facing the door, resting with his eyes closed in a leisurely manner, appearing peaceful and harmless. Occasionally, he would pick up the newspaper on his lap to glance at it, and only then could a flash of sharpness be glimpsed in his eyes. Meanwhile, the adjacent empty desk and chair, sprinkled with fine sunlight and carrying the faint, bitter fragrance of flowers, was the place where Wulian often stayed while doing his schoolwork. There were still a few roses in the vase that he had cut from home, they were already a bit withered. The moment Wulian stepped into the room, the quiet and peaceful atmosphere suddenly froze, turning into a heavy, suffocating, and damp mass of air. As if a heavy rain was about to fall. Hello. I need to return to Tingen for a period of time. Per the request of that deacon gentleman from before, I've come here to register my whereabouts. Wulian looked around the room, seemingly uncomfortable from being watched by so many people. This discomfort deepened after he realized he had woken someone up. Ham, go get the forms. Borgia looked at the student he had briefly spent time with and was the first to speak, his tone clearly businesslike. They're in the third drawer of the bookcase. Ah, okay. Ham stood up, subtly patting Berg's arm. The registration went smoothly. Routine filling of information, routine verbal constraints, routine goodbyes, until he sat on the return steam train with Weekend. Wulian didn't do anything extra. Tingen, Blackthorn Security Company. Beep beep, beep, beep. In the captain's office, the sound of the telegraph machine suddenly rang out. Dunn's movement of tidying up forms paused, and he turned to begin this unexpected decoding work. A telegram from Backland, asking if Wulian Yassos has already arrived in Tingen. He repeated the message in a low voice, somewhat puzzled as he gave an affirmative reply, and soon after received more detailed information. At 3:15 this afternoon, the members of the Nighthawks team stationed at Midnight Hymn, in the North District of Backland collectively fell into a dream. The characters and scenes in these dreams varied, but the only commonality was that the characters in the dreams informed them of the detailed information regarding the acting method. The reason Wulian was listed as a suspect was truly because his timing and motive were too perfect. Using the excuse of returning to Tingen to confuse his time staying in Backland, then using that time to leak the acting method to several former colleagues, this was a possibility. However, Dunn's brow furrowed slightly as he glanced at the forms on his desk that he hadn't had time to put away. Wulian Yassos, registered at 15:08. Completing the registration would take 3 to 5 minutes, and that wasn't even counting the time spent leaving the Blackthorn Security Company. Could he have rushed from Tingen to Backland so quickly? As the captain of the Nighthawks team, Dunn knew that the apprentice pathway had similar abilities. However, Backland and the Holy Cathedral would certainly take this into consideration, so there was no need for him to remind them. Dolly had written before, saying that the other spirit inside Wulian had already disappeared. The current Wulian was no longer the little fellow who used to chirp and bring him information. But considering his mother's identity, plus the fact that the other party hadn't shown any harmful tendencies for the time being, he would treat him as an informant for now. Hey, Just like that asylum Dr. Klein found. Thinking of Klein, Dunn's thoughts suddenly paused. He picked up his cup and took a quiet sip of coffee. Before Wulian came to Black Rose to register, what had Klein told him? Cough, I can't remember. North District of Backland, the underground area of St. Samuel's Church. Excellency Sisima, isn't this result a bit too hasty? We haven't even let the colleagues in Tingen investigate the possibility of Wulian Yasso's using a Beander item. Holding a freshly issued exoneration statement, this furrowed-browed Red Gloves member was about to continue, but was interrupted by Sisima's light chuckle. Spirit doesn't lie, and neither do dreams. Since Wulian's situation has already been confirmed, and the timing doesn't allow him to do so, then Wulian is not a problem. Seal the case file. Watching the other party leave, Sisima pulled down his collar that covered his lips and leisurely took a sip of black tea. Spirit doesn't lie, and neither do dreams. Unless it has received the permission of a deity. Let it go this time. I hope this little fellow can clean up his tracks more thoroughly in the future. Side story 2. 8 late Valentine's Day sweet treat, please check it out. Don't use your brain. You've been eaten by a fish. I was originally the god of error at sequence 0, but unexpectedly, I woke up one day and fell from grace because my membership expired. Thinking back on those brain-dead operations of the past, I've learned from my mistakes and decided to seize this opportunity to take back everything that belongs to me. Today, meeting you is a pleasant surprise, and we've hit it off quite well. Me 50, and listen to my grand plan for revival. Press this button. Weekend, stop. Before he could finish reading the content in front of him, Wulian quickly pressed down on Weekend's pause. With an "awoo," he bit her restless big tail, only then feeling slightly relieved as he continued to read the inexplicably appearing text. MMPHNEHAOIEH you will gain the ability to write a fairy tale. Quote. This fairy tale is independent of the plot in the book, will not have any substantial impact on the world of mysteries, and is valid for one day. That was it. Wulian blinked his eyes. It seemed like a harmless little gift. Awoo. With a twist of her body, Weekend escaped from Wulian's loosened grip, her feather duster-like big tail sweeping across the tip of his nose with just the right amount of force. After a few thunderous sneezes, Wulian spat out the stray fur in his mouth, an evil plan gradually forming in his mind. Gia, amidst the cat's shocked gaze, he let out a pleasant, sinister laugh. It's a fairy tale, okay, a fairy tale. So it's perfectly reasonable for everyone to be mindless, have blurred memories of the real world, and not be harmed by mythical creatures, nodding. On the other side of that mountain, on the other side of that sea, there's a person named Dolly, she wears blue eyeshadow, she has a mysterious aura. Daily Simone rubbed her dizzy forehead, staring blankly at the messy pile of magic books in front of her and the bubbling pitch-black cauldron beside them, feeling that something wasn't quite right. She was a spirit medium, that was true, but why did her style have such a strong witch-like sense of déjà vu? One day, the villagers came to her door clamoring, but because they were too afraid, they hesitated to knock. Outside the door, the sound of chattering and whispering didn't stop for a long time. Although the owners of the voices deliberately lowered their volume, they couldn't withstand the sheer number of people talking, and bits of conversation still drifted into Dolly's ears through the small wooden window. Will she really help us? We weren't warm enough to her, and we don't have any rewards to pay. I heard that witches, P2E, spirit mediums charge many gold coins for their help. But we really need her help. If that nightmare is allowed to continue its rampage, our children, our family, and our friends will all sob. It's fine, isn't it just a reward? Let's ask her what she's interested in. Maybe she doesn't want gold, and she doesn't eat people. Mommy, is the witch sister a bad person? Silly girl, don't say such things. The spirit medium sister is just a bit special, a bit of a loner. Dolly looked at her bewitching self in the mirror, wearing blue makeup, and gave a self-deprecating smile. The spirit medium walked out of the wooden hut and asked the villagers what had happened. The villagers summoned their courage and pleaded with the spirit medium to help them rescue their relatives and friends trapped by the nightmare. Before the people could discuss anything, Dolly pushed open the somewhat low wooden door. She lazily scanned the lush forest before letting her gaze fall on the nervous faces. What do you want with me? The people before her were of all ages, men and women alike, dressed simply. They exchanged looks, seemingly nudging each other silently with their eyes, yet still, no one was willing to move. Finally, someone overcame their fear and stepped forward, feigning composure. SP Spirit Medium Excellency. The man spoke tremulously. Since last week, no villager who went to the south of the forest has returned. We might have thought they encountered wild beasts at first, so we sent many people to find them, even taking weapons, but they all disappeared. We didn't want to give up on our friends and family, so we found the person who runs the fastest and has the best eyesight to take a look from a distance. She said those missing people are all sleeping in the south of the forest, and no matter how much she calls, they won't wake up. The oldest elder in the village said his grandfather's generation mentioned that a nightmare sleeps in the south of the forest. It must be him starting to harm people. So, you came to me too. Dolly's cold white knuckles rested against her elegantly curved chin, giving it a gentle rub. It was clearly a meaningless action, yet it made the villagers tense up again. Please help us, Spirit Medium Excellency. Men and women, young and old, summoned their courage and pleaded in unison, their voices even trembling slightly, tinged with a sob. I really don't eat people. Dolly thought helplessly. The kind spirit medium agreed to go to the south of the forest to take a look. She asked the villagers for the purest flour, the most delicious delicacy, and a bottle of the most mellow wine. Carrying these things, she rushed to the south of the forest to find the evil nightmare. Why do I feel like I'm being set up? Carrying a bottle of red wine, holding a roast chicken, and even having a lily of the valley forcibly tucked into her hair bun, Dolly murmured softly, falling into deep self-doubt. Her residence was already deep in the woods, only a half-hour walk from the so-called south of the forest. As she was about to step into the nightmare's territory, Dolly casually summoned a spirit wandering nearby to ask about the situation inside. Even spirit bodies disappear. Dolly narrowed her eyes, pondering the other party's intentions. The missing people had all fallen into a deep sleep, and she couldn't perceive the spirituality of any living person within her sight. In contrast, these people's vital signs were still stable. The nightmare seemed to have no intention of harming their bodies. As for the spirits, looking at everything before her, the spirit medium was somewhat confused by the nightmare's purpose. And while she was troubled, an unexpected helper had already been waiting for a long time. Pardon the intrusion, spirit medium lady. At some point, a half-person tall dark figure appeared beside Dolly. It was a cat in boots. The cat had black fur and golden eyes, wearing an exaggeratedly curved brimmed top hat and exquisite, lustrous leather boots. At this moment, it was bowing to Dolly in a very human-like manner, its gold-rimmed glasses reflecting the dappled light. I have come at my master's command to inform you of the truth here. Your master? Dolly asked in confusion. That nightmare. No. The cat adjusted its top hat, which had been pushed askew by its soft ears, its golden eyes becoming solemn and sharp. You may call my lord. Mr. the Fool. The kind cat in boots told the spirit medium that Mr. Nightmare celebrated his 300th birthday last week, and his Beander powers had significantly increased. This caused him, who was accustomed to sleeping, to unconsciously expand his domain, accidentally involving the villagers and spirit bodies passing through the south of the forest. You also have Beander powers and are a spirit medium skilled in this area, so it's fine even if you enter Mr. Nightmare's domain. The cat in boots said sincerely, as long as you wake him up, the sleeping villagers will wake up as well. Dolly nodded, accepting the cat's explanation. She slowly walked into the nightmare's territory, taking in the scene that far exceeded her imagination. The lush forest became sparse here, and a soft flowery meadow spread out. The villagers lay neatly on a particularly flat patch of grass, their complexions ruddy and expressions peaceful. From time to time, transparent little things with cat ears would scurry around making gug sounds, chanting, meow meow, as they worked together to help the villagers who were tossing and turning tidy their quilts made of leaves. As for the so-called Mr. Nightmare, in the shadows of the forest where no one set foot, a giant eight-legged demonic wolf was lazily sprawled out like a furry carpet, its exhaled breath turning into a breeze that made the flowers and grass sway. Beside the big gray wolf, a slender man was sleeping soundly against a chinaberry tree, wearing a somewhat crudely woven flower wreath on his head. Dolly stopped in front of the man, carefully tracing his features, an inexplicable surge of anger rising in her heart. After trying to call him a few times and even patting him tentatively, Dolly still couldn't wake the sleeping Mr. Nightmare. After thinking hard to no avail, she turned her gaze to the cat in boots not far away. Cough, I'm not too sure either. The cat seemed a bit bashful, yet vaguely expectant. Perhaps, lady, you could try the fairy tale way. The fairy tale way. Hesitation began to color Dolly's gaze, but she soon seemed to have figured something out, and her eyes became firm again. She nodded. Dolly's gaze traced the contours of Mr. Nightmare's face, soft and gentle, like a lover's caress. She leaned down, the distance between them getting closer. She slightly parted her indigo blue lips. She raised the wine bottle in her hand. She said, "If you don't wake up, I'm going to crack your head open, okay?" Wulian, who was cosplaying as a cat-fied Gelman. Wulian. Wait, is something not quite right? Is the fairy tale script you received, the prince battles the evil dragon? S-T-O-P. Cough, wow, what a coincidence. Mr. Nightmare is allergic to Lily of the Valley. Through persistent efforts, the spirit medium finally woke the nightmare and rescued the trapped villagers. And the villagers also came to like the kind spirit medium lady and the simple Mr. Nightmare, and everyone lived happily ever after. Triple speed broadcast. Cough. Sorry, cough. Dunn woke up in a fit of violent coughing, instinctively covering his mouth and nose while also apologizing. This lady, cough, could you please take that Lily of the Valley away? Dunn quickly found the culprit and, while making the request, stood up leaning against the chinaberry tree beside him, walking a few steps away with unsteady feet. No problem. Dolly casually took the flour from her bun and also set down the roast chicken and red wine. It's said that the villagers sleeping this week were all you're doing. Please resolve this issue, Mr. Nightmare. Dunn looked at the villagers lying in a row in confusion, and only after a few seconds did he realize, so it was me who pulled them into the dream. I was wondering why there were so many strangers in my dreams lately. He smiled mellowly and kindly, his deep eyes as profound as the abyss. It's been resolved, please rest assured. Watching the villagers wake up one after another, Dolly nodded, but she had no intention of leaving. She lightly pointed to the food placed aside. Do you want to try some together? It would be my honor. Dunn gave her a bow. Later on, the villagers realized the two were friendly and accepted Dolly and Dunn. But they didn't seem to need such acceptance much. As fellow outcasts, Dolly was quite happy to chat with Dunn. They shared beautiful scenery, shared delicious food, and shared everything interesting in this tiny world. In the final scene of the story, the catworms laid out a beautiful picnic mat and stacked themselves up with a heave-ho, pouring refreshing sweet iced tea for the chatting Dunn and Dolly. The eight-legged demonic wolf curled its body to surround the two, its duster-like big tail thumping the ground rhythmically, splashing up stray bits of fur that shimmered in the light. Dunn looked around uncomfortably, but in the end, braving Dolly's teasing smile, he presented an indigo blue bellflower. It is very beautiful. Dunn stammered, it's very much like you. Oh, Dolly drawled, just like that. She looked at the blushing Dunn with a beaming smile. I thought you wanted to say. I will always wait for you. Dunn interrupted her somewhat rudely. How could she be the one to bring up such words? But he was also afraid that his love would cause Dolly trouble. So, Dunn suddenly stood up, his limbs stiff as he prepared to leave. Okay. Dolly's voice, filled with laughter, drifted out lightly and then wound its way into the depths of Dunn's heart. Heavy as 1,000 pounds. She said, you finally spoke up. Well, this fairy tale ends here. Thank you to all the readers for coming. See you next chapter. Not. A fairy tale that hasn't been punctured is just like a secret identity that hasn't been exposed, utterly tasteless. Wulian, hiding sneakily to the side, looked at the harmonious pair of Dunn and Dolly and revealed a joyful smile. Snap. He snapped his fingers. Memory returned. The sky suddenly darkened, the wind stopped, and the trees and grass no longer swayed. The only things still vivid in the world were Dunn and Dolly's suddenly dilated pupils and their slightly trembling breaths. The world slowly regained its colors. Dunn's voice was a bit soft and tinged with difficulty. So, was this a dream? No one answered him for a long time. Hey, really, having a bad memory is one thing, but how could I dream of something so absurd? He laughed self-deprecatingly. It seems I'm not too old yet, my imagination is quite rich. Dummy. Dolly said muffledly. I am. Dunn responded with a smile. Idiot. Yeah. Moron. I'm here. Coward. Yes, you're right about everything. You. Dolly gritted her teeth, stood up, and tackled the blockhead in front of her. You bastard. The warm, almost scorching sensation was distinctly unfamiliar, and from this moment on, everything before them completely broke away from the dream. Dunn realized something and once again had the urge to flee. But in the end, he couldn't bear to. Slowly and with restraint, he curled his fingers and pressed them against Dolly's back. Yes, I like you. Daily Simone, I, Dunn Smith, am fond of you. I swear by my life. I love you. No humans or animals were harmed in the making of this article, except for the roast chicken whispers. Chapter 46, Person A and Person B walk toward each other. Woohoo. In the sky above Tingan City, a clump of air with zero presence was shouting and darting around, frolicking recklessly like a child who had just gotten a new toy. According to Cuttlefish, when Xiao Ke is in the spirit body state of, I summon myself, his flight speed is close to a car on a highway. However, perhaps due to his higher status, Wulian's flight speed, bolstered by idealism, was basically on par with a high-speed train, and this was limited by his knowledge from his previous life, otherwise, he might have been even faster. As for whether he would hit anything after the speed increase. In the steam age, there weren't many skyscrapers to begin with. As long as he avoided a few cathedrals, a height of 20 meters was safe enough. Moreover, ordinary items without spirituality were just thicker air to a spirit body. Even if he did crash head-on, it wouldn't matter. So, this, out of body, is great. Having had his fill of role-playing an intercity cruise missile, Wulian finally deigned to stop. He rubbed his face, which seemed to have been deformed by the wind, though he didn't seem to have one right now, and began to lightly survey his surroundings. Street. Selena's church. Calculating the time, everyone at the Blackthorn Security Company should still be working at this hour. It shouldn't be a problem to go in and take a look in this state, right? He would just do it secretly. Even though he knew Adam's methods were enough to keep him invisible even before a demigod, Wulian still felt like a thief, tiptoeing into the building he had just encountered. In the captain's office, Dunn, who had received a return call from Backlund, pondered for a moment before finally choosing to set aside his doubts. He picked up his coffee and took a sip, looking up at his team member who could hardly hide his curiosity. It's not a big problem. Backlund verified Wulian's whereabouts with us. As for what you just said, tomorrow night. Elizabeth Anna's birthday banquet. She invited Melissa, as well as Benson and me. Klein helpfully picked up the conversation. Elizabeth is the girl who covered for me when Selena Wood was involved in mirror divination. The last time I cleared the wraiths in Lamud Town was also at her request. I have some impression of that. But, Klein, why did you think to tell me this? Dunn asked with some curiosity. After all, the Nighthawks' spare time had always been theirs to manage, and there was no need to ask for leave. Klein had no obligation to report it. Why did he think of it? First, there was Selena recklessly trying sinister divination, and then Elizabeth carelessly leaving blood at an ancient site. To be involved in 2 consecutive supernatural incidents, this young lady had quite a talent for attracting trouble. Oh, speaking of which, I've encountered quite a bit myself. Maybe we're kindred spirits. No, wait, I'm a professional. Isn't it normal for a policeman to see criminals more often than an ordinary person? Pulling back his thoughts, Klein simply shrugged at his superior, smiling somewhat helplessly. Just consider it a precaution on my part. At least, reporting it shouldn't be wrong. He would like to divine the fortune of everything he encountered, but there wasn't enough time. Not to mention the issue of mediums. Alas, divination really isn't omnipotent. Lately, the sky over Tingen had been somewhat gloomy, especially as evening approached. But Benefactor's building still felt happy. Since his boy had left him to go for a joyride, as Wulian's genuine old father, it wasn't too much to go out for some fresh air, right? He safely stored that black hairband, which was like a time bomb, and checked his clothes in the floor-length mirror in the foyer. Ensuring he hadn't left the little fellow any reason to be critical, Benefactor's building finally stepped out leisurely. Meow, the cat called out softly and sweetly, hooking his pant leg with her claw. Rather than trying to keep him there, it seemed more like she had just found a random place to sharpen her claws. Benefactor's building squatted down, rubbing Weekend's head the way Wulian usually did. Seeing the furry little thing staring at him with a hint of confusion, a trace of amusement flickered at the corners of his lips. Oh, quite clever, aren't you? After tearing up some jerky for Weekend and pocketing a piece for himself, this stuff really did taste good. Benefactor's building finally received the going out exemption granted by the kitten. He stood by the side of Champagne Street for a long time, looking at the buildings and the flow of people, which were familiar to his core, from a slightly unfamiliar perspective. Are you, little Yassos? A hesitant female voice pulled Benefactor's building back from his slightly drifting thoughts. He feigned surprise and looked toward the sound, his voice sounding youthful and somewhat immature. Ah. Good afternoon, Mrs. Freewill. The two hadn't had much contact to begin with, so the lady naturally wouldn't notice anything unusual about the youth before her. You seem to have been standing here for a long time. Are you waiting for your father? My father. The old man was furious at his unfilial son. Right now, he's probably at the main house coaxing his well-behaved and talented dear granddaughter. Tisk tisk, I wonder if the old man will just pluck me out and throw me into a snuff bottle when I take the little fellow back. Or treat me like some little toy to show the younger generation for curiosity. Hiss, maybe I should just tell that brat that my branch of the family suddenly died out. If I go back like this, where will my dignity be? While his mind was muttering endlessly, Wulian's face showed a look of deep sorrow. My father passed away just a few days ago. Mrs. Freewill opened her mouth, seemingly wanting to ask more, but seeing the youth's pale face, she couldn't bring herself to say another word. Ah, it's in the past now. The thin youth wore a faint smile, in turn comforting the kind lady who looked mournful. It was lockjaw syndrome. It was likely a leftover issue from his previous work. Not long after receiving treatment in Backland, fortunately, he didn't suffer too much. It wasn't lockjaw syndrome, but everything else was the truth, making a mistake at work, summoning an outer god, and then attracting Aemon and being killed by Aemon. Clearly, Benefactor's building's passing made all small talk lose its meaning. Watching Mrs. Freewill leave with heavy steps, Benefactor's building shrugged, fished a copper penny from his pocket, and flicked it with a clink. As if using too much force, the copper coin traced an arc in the air, accurately breaking free from Benefactor's building's open palm and rolling, clatter clatter, toward the other end of the street. His gaze lazily swept over the dust-covered coin, and Benefactor's building casually withdrew his eyes, stepping toward the direction it indicated. Senior Wulian. A light and sweet voice came from the girl's throat, carrying a hint of surprise and joy. Long time no see. Wulian nodded with a smile to the girl with curly brown hair and a cute face. It was Elizabeth. The girl was still wearing a beautiful blue dress today. It seemed she was following the fashion from Backland. The beautifully tailored long dress was adorned with soft ruffles and butterfly-shaped ribbons, complemented by the lustrous, round pearl buttons on the front, making this lady display her usual youth and beauty. If it were Benefactor's building himself, he would certainly have keenly noticed the clever thoughts the lady had put into her outfit, and with his audacity and silver tongue, he would have made his praises fervent and comforting. But as the Wulian, Elizabeth knew, he could only properly answer the girl's various questions about his stay in Tingen. Unlike when facing Mrs. Freewill, Benefactor's building did not give Elizabeth the "I cursed myself" explanation. On one hand, Elizabeth was only familiar with Wulian himself, and since the other party hadn't explicitly mentioned Benefactor's building, the matter could be glossed over with a more vague explanation. On the other hand, Wulian lowered his head, his warm brown eyes looking straight through the glass lenses into the girl's crystal clear, almost glowing light blue eyes. His son might not notice, but as someone who had been through it, Benefactor's building could glimpse some affection in the girl's every move, ignorant and green, as beautiful as a bud just beginning to bloom. At a time like this, he shouldn't spoil the young girl's fun. As it turned out, there was a reason Benefactor's building was able to win the heart of a beauty back in the day. When their chat came to an end, Elizabeth seemed to have made a decision. She lightly pursed her lips and looked at Wulian, Sr. Tomorrow is my birthday, and I've invited many friends to my home. I'm sorry this invitation is so sudden, would you be willing to attend my birthday banquet? The tactful Benefactor's building naturally wouldn't give a second answer. Anyway, that brat doesn't object to it, he sneered in his heart. Besides, his own kid didn't seem to intend to lead the girl on, and it wasn't Benefactor's building's place to be the villain who breaks up the couple. He spent more effort on that Moretti than on Elizabeth. Serves this kid right for being single, Benefactor's building thought gleefully, with a "no one gets to have a good time" attitude. Under the repeated interference of Wulan Sorov, the Nighthawk forces in Tingen City have only increased, and in Zhangwil's plan could only die in the womb, but this is far from the end of our story. As a valuable mobile force of the Church of the Night, the Red Gloves still need to hunt down criminals and eliminate evil, and we always have many friends, and the territory of Ahawa County is wide enough. The dark red chimney had already lost its fire, and the beautiful flowers had long since fallen onto the lawn to turn into dust. The nameless house had lost the sounds of the living, but the simply styled quill had not yet stopped writing. Amidst the rustle of the rubbing sound, the people on the other side walked on the open road, yet they also seemed to be walking within the destiny composed by 008, unaware and without hesitation. Lockjaw syndrome is what people in the Steam Age called tetanus. After all, Benefactor's building was technically a locksmith, so he would likely come into contact with rust and such, well, a filthy rich locksmith. Chapter 47, Birthday Banquet. Elizabeth's house was located on Decor Street in the North District, only a few stops away by public carriage from Champagne Street. It was an elegant detached villa with a lush lawn, well-planned flower beds, and beautifully shaped ornamental trees. The pink and white clematis climbed the openwork fence, blooming brilliantly and imbuing the air with a faint herbal scent amidst the dancing light and shadows. Led by the butler, Wulian tidied his clothes slightly and stepped toward the beautiful ivory-white building with its azure-tiled roof. Elizabeth and her father, having been informed by the servant, came out to greet him at that moment. After the three of them, who were not strangers, exchanged a few pleasantries, the lead of the conversation returned to the hands of today's little birthday girl. "Senior, you're here so early, I've never seen you dressed like this." The young girl spoke with a beaming smile, inadvertently standing on her tiptoes as she moved, as lively and happy as a little sparrow. "It is your birthday banquet, after all. Or rather, would my usual attire be somewhat impolite?" Wulian, under Mr. Anna's scrutinizing gaze, handed the girl a palm-sized wooden box wrapped in beautiful cellophane. "Happy birthday, Elizabeth. Well, it was prepared in a bit of a hurry, so please don't mind it." "I won't." Elizabeth winked playfully, then realizing she was losing her composure, she deliberately stiffened her face. "My invitation was quite sudden too." "All right." Wulian smiled gently, his gaze falling on a servant hurrying over not far away. "I think your friends are still waiting for you." Klein was very surprised. He hadn't expected to see Wulian here at Elizabeth's. When the three siblings arrived, many guests had already reached the Anna's residence, and pre-dinner snacks had long been laid out on the side tables in the living room for everyone to help themselves. Young men and women sat or stood by the sofas, chatting away in a lively and warm atmosphere. And the chestnut-haired boy standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, nibbling on a frosted cookie, who could it be but Wulian? Unlike his usual casual attire, Wulian wore a well-tailored navy blue formal suit today, paired with a light-colored shirt of the same tone and a thin dark gold pocket watch chain, adding a touch of elegance and formality. His medium-length chestnut hair was tied back low with a black ribbon, and combined with his good looks, he even possessed a hint of vintage nobility. Noticing Klein's gaze, Elizabeth excitedly introduced the guest. "This is my senior from UWAS Public School, Wulian Yassos. He has already been admitted to the Archaeology Department of Backland University." "Well, miss, I can see you're very proud of your friend." But, Klein thought of the stranger's look the other gave him when registering yesterday, and the captain's vague warning echoed in his mind. "Wulian Yassos. Yes, you noticed too, he doesn't seem to know you." To put it simply, Wulian's memory has returned to the time he just graduated from public school. "After all, I almost forgot, your level isn't high enough to know those details yet. Anyway, try to minimize contact with Wulian. If you run into him, just keep an eye on him." Klein, who had already exchanged names with Wulian yesterday, pondered for a moment before greeting him tactfully as he approached the boy. "Good evening, Mr. Yassos." "Good evening." Wulian, receiving Elizabeth's timely introduction, stood up with a smile. "Miss Moretti, and the two gentlemen." As an amnesiac in Klein's eyes, Wulian maintained his persona quite well. As if confirming the other's reaction through observation, he showed a certain degree of familiarity with Klein and Melissa, and during the conversation, he led them to reveal more clues, such as the archaeological exchange with Klein, or Melissa's care for her cat. It had to be said that since coming to this world, Wulian had been in social situations every moment. Smiling, exchanging pleasantries, and finding topics with various strangers or relatively familiar people. Heaven knows, he was supposed to be a typical introvert who wouldn't leave the house for 2 months. Thinking of this, Wulian couldn't help but feel a surge of sorrow, and he took a fierce bite of the stewed lamb while his back was to the crowd. The high-standard banquet was cleared away, and the girls retreated to the second-floor living room to be hosted by Elizabeth, while the remaining gentlemen played card games. Strange, why did Russell only leave behind Texas Hold'em and fight the landlord? Didn't his family play Guandan during the New Year? And Mahjong? Wulian, who only knew how to play Fight the Evil, was urged by the gentleman to sit at the Texas Hold'em table. It seemed the most vocal gentleman intended to make a profit off him. Then he naturally couldn't let them have their way. When Elizabeth and the others came downstairs, the gentlemen's confrontation was just nearing its end. The fourth community card had been flipped, and the gazes of the final 3 gentlemen flickered across each other's faces like woven threads. Inadvertently, a hint of joy appeared at the corner of Wulian's lips, like a small fox tail that couldn't be hidden under the bushes. "I raise 5 souls." He kept a straight face and placed a heavy bet. In a game where the small blind was half a penny and the big blind was 1 penny, this was a quite risky move. Or rather, confidence. The next gentleman didn't care about the amount, but he did have doubts about the cards in his hand. After weighing his options, he looked up and smiled. "Call, 5 souls." The last gentleman's call was quite decisive. He calmly pushed forward his share of the bet and winked at the expressionless Wulian. "Mr. Yassos, you bluffed too many times." Wulian just smiled, but his expression grew a bit stiff. The final cards were flipped, and Wulian continued to raise as if forcing his way through, while the second gentleman sighed and chose to fold. The gentleman in the dealer position also chose to raise, and the situation fell into a stalemate. Showdown, a gentleman watching from the side reminded them. Wulian obediently revealed his cards. Including the community cards, it was a quite beautiful straight flush. Even more beautiful was that it was just slightly higher than the last gentleman's. After a brief silence, people began to clap and laugh, and the atmosphere suddenly became heated. At that moment, Wulian finally let out a hearty laugh, childishly scooping up the coins that served as the pot, his eyes curving into crescents, full of joy. Host and guests were all happy. Since the food at Elizabeth's house was truly excellent, Wulian still had some indigestion by the time he said goodbye to the Anna's family and left. After roughly calculating the distance, he simply chose to walk home. He had been looking at the crimson moonlight for over 2 months, yet it was still quite hard to get used to. Gas lamps were fairly common in this era, but the relatively high cost still made most families choose to rest early. Therefore, except for the dim yellow streetlights along the way, it was pitch black all around, as if some monster were lurking there, waiting to devour someone. "Oh, by the way, old father," Wulian made small talk, "if I didn't peek at cards or use divination but used my brain while playing Texas Hold'em, does that count as using Beander abilities? What's the point of asking me? You'll just justify it anyway," Benefactor's building sneered. "What, are you bored? Or, are you afraid of the dark? Want someone to comfort you? Should I hold you in my arms and coax you to sleep? After Wulian's mother passed away, did you ever comfort him?" Wulian actually followed Benefactor's building's lead and thought about it. "I always feel like you're quite unreliable, especially when it comes to raising a child." "How am I unreliable? I've raised the child to this age." Benefactor's building's voice stopped abruptly, sounding quite sheepish. "Whatever, I'm already dead, aren't I? You just work hard to live a long life yourself. I'll do my best." Wulian let out a long breath and wanted to say more, but he was drawn by a weary figure not far away. "Isn't that Jelens? Stay away from her," Benefactor's building warned Wulian through gritted teeth. "If you don't want to become a ghost wandering around right now, then report to the Nighthawks." "Hey, I didn't expect you to be more like his late mother than my son." Benefactor's building mocked the reckless junior with heavy malice. "My dear Mr. Zoroaster, as a subject of significant focus for 008, do you think your warning could bypass coincidence and achieve anything? Or are you just looking for peace of mind so you can continue being your gentle and refined, outstanding university student?" Wulian turned a deaf ear to his cheap old father's sarcasm, merely closing his eyes slightly. Then, he stood somewhat desolately on the street corner, mimicking Benefactor's building's past mannerisms, and gave a light, flippant shrug. How are we supposed to survive? Chapter 48, Escape. Hitting it off immediately, the two Messrs. Zoroast prepared to seek help from the main family, or rather, to take refuge. Having packed the important items from his residence in Tingen under the guidance of Benefactor's building, Wulian took a deep breath, suddenly finding himself quite ridiculous. High-dimensional overseer. Outer deity status. No, at best, he was just a weak, timid, self-deceiving cryptologist. He had always been timid and should have stayed far away from the main storyline, yet he couldn't help but chatter like an open jar, leaking all sorts of intelligence, fearing that a single missed word would lead Dunn and the others into the same old ruts that hadn't even been carved yet. He wanted to change something. But, look at him now. His family background had been thoroughly seen through by Dunn, Sisama, and the others, and his golden finger of knowing the plot had been exposed through his repeated attempts at concealment. It seemed he had used the sudden turn of events to leave the Nighthawks, yet he still lived under their watchful eyes, relying on old sentiments, unable to break free in the slightest. Since, in the Nighthawks' view, the spirit body corresponding to Beander Wulian had already vanished, his clumsy performance of amnesia had to be maintained consistently, there wouldn't even be a chance to go back on his word and cry wolf. What's more, the problems of Eamon and Adam had never been resolved. So, what on earth was he doing? Wulian thought, quite perplexed. Perhaps it was because he had left his brain behind so completely during university, but he always acted with a certain vague confusion and chaos. To put it kindly, it was acting on impulse, but for someone who should be walking independently in society, it was undoubtedly a sign of immaturity. He chose to leave the Nighthawks in Backland because they weren't the primary targets of 008 and shouldn't have been dragged into this whirlpool by him. As another target of 008's schemes, having left his Nighthawk identity, he couldn't become an ally of the Tingen squad either. Since things had come to this, why not use this amnesia to draw a clear line between himself and the previous reckless, pseudo-mysterious Wulian? I'll just treat it as starting a second playthrough. Wulian sighed with a weary smile. He glanced at the small leather suitcase containing half his belongings, added some food for weekend, and headed straight for the security company named Black Rose. Yes, he was going to report his departure from the area again. A bird startled by the mere twang of a bowstring, that was exactly it. Today was Cohen Lee's turn to guard Channy's gate. Holding the latest issue of Ladies Aesthetics, Cohen Lee looked as if he were studying some epic masterpiece, facing a formidable foe. This, no, too little fabric, this color is a bit dull, Tiffany probably won't like it. Oh, this one is good. Limited edition. Only available in Backland. In terms of cost effectiveness, and this one. He took a sip of the soothing floral tea Tiffany had prepared for him, muttering as he sketched and wrote, intent on finding a suitable commemorative gift for his fiancée. Phew, maybe I should ask Roseanne for advice. After an unknown amount of time, Cohen Lee collapsed onto the long table in the duty room, exhausted. Ah, his picky sweetheart. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of leather shoes striking stone tiles echoed hollowly in the narrow corridor, yet one could still discern a hint of the owner's restraint and gentleness. It wouldn't be Leonard, whose steps were fast and messy, the captain's footsteps were more powerful than this. Fry's stride would be longer. Cohen Lee ruled out the suspects one by one in his mind, finally settling on their reliable, seer, teammate. Oh, now he was a clown, who liked to tell flamboyant jokes. Good morning, Cohen Lee. Klein greeted him with a smile, his long trench coat, similar in style to the captain's, looking sharp and well-pressed. Melissa made some trinkets, hoping I could use them to get along better with my colleagues. Hey, it must be some nonsense Benson filled her head with. Oh ho, nonsense. You look pretty proud to me. Cohen Lee, who was in the middle of a passionate romance, was quite skilled at understanding others' feelings, so he tactfully took the exquisitely crafted gear doll and launched into a series of unreserved praises. Let's just say, he used a full 500 words of aria just to praise this indeed very interesting clockwork horse. Thank you for your hard work, Cohen Lee, your praise was truly spot on, pity, it's a mechanical cat. Klein suppressed a laugh as he thanked his empathetic colleague, then turned to find the next victim, looking forward to their opinions on Melissa's painstaking work. Ahem, of course, he would definitely tell Melissa her creation was a huge hit. Felly didn't understand why things had developed into their current state. After the boy in sunglasses had visited, she had indeed considered whether to take the child and leave Jellin, but she still hesitated. Having left Jellin and his weekly salary of £2, how would she, a woman who hadn't received any education since leaving the church school, support herself and her child? Was she to live with her child in a cheap apartment with a mixed crowd and only one public restroom per floor, barely scraping by washing filthy clothes? Her little Jay wasn't even 2 yet. Just wait and see, he'll change for the better, he definitely will. She told herself this. At worst, she still had that money hidden away, and she had her child. Everything will be fine, it will be fine. After witnessing Jellin's laziness, greed, and hysteria countless times, Felly finally saw hope. For her, it was true hope. Jellin had lost his job and all his savings. But he had come to his senses, he began to weep bitterly, having truly repented. He told Felly that he wanted to live properly and cherish their current life even more. Even if I have to take a part-time job as an accountant or work as a docker, I will definitely create the best conditions for you and the child. With stubble on his face and dark circles under his eyes nearly engulfing his sunken features, he solemnly promised his wife that he would settle everything. Yes, from the day she married Jellin, hadn't everything been handled by him? Felly thought so, and a bit of color returned to her pale face. Everything will be fine. Oh, little Jay, you're awake. Look, sweet cream, a whole half jar. She carefully held the young child, smiling kindly and warmly, her whole being radiating the beautiful glow of a mother. Through a kind neighbor's introduction, Felly had gone to the Anna's house last night to do some odd jobs cleaning up, earning a few pennies and some high-quality food. A cold steak lightly grilled would make a brilliant meal, a few dried desserts still retained their pleasant aroma, and there were bright, beautiful exotic fruits rarely seen on ordinary days. Thanks to the generous host. Praise the Lord of Storms. Felly prayed softly, using her fingertip to dab some cream on the child's lips. Her little Jay had been a bit listless lately, he needed to eat more good things to nourish his body. The toddler looked at his mother with large, dull eyes, slowly licking the cream from his lips, his tongue pale and lacking any sense of taste. A trail of saliva ran across his skin, which was as deathly white as wall ash. Knock, knock, knock. A loud knocking at the door stopped Felly's next move. She asked in confusion, "Who is it?" "Here to check the gas meter," a rough male voice responded. Strange. Feli turned back and glanced at the gas meter, which was already covered in a thick layer of dust. With Jelen's repeated extravagance, their family hadn't used gas for a long time. The woman opened the door without suspicion, only to feel something was wrong again at the scene before her. There were several lean, capable men dressed as sailors. You! Feli's exclamation turned into a shrill scream as she saw the men lunging at the pale child, and soon, this scream was also violently suppressed, turning into a whimpering moan. Boss, that went pretty smoothly, eh? Sailor, with a buzz cut laughed easily. The Evernight side even said, "Shut your mouth, slight," the older, Punisher, squad captain scolded in a low voice. Let's go, the main event might still be to come. Chapter 49, Accomplice. Tingen, Blackthorn Security Company. Dunn looked at the youth before him in surprise. You're leaving Tingen? Wulian nodded slightly, maintaining his somewhat gloomy state. Things here are settled. I want to go back to Winter County to see my mother. Perhaps I'll stay there for a while. A reasonable explanation, if only it didn't conflict with Benefactor's Building's explanation. Dunn frowned slightly and asked after a moment of deliberation, how much of an impression do you still have of your mother? According to Benefactor's Building's explanation of the extra spirit, the various abnormalities including Wulian's partial memory loss were the result of spirit dissipation. This was the conclusion he reached after advancing to Prometheus. And according to Dolly, or rather the side from Backland, Wulian himself was not consciously aware of the Beander world. The only memory loss out of control occurred after another spirit took over, which was the beginning of July this year. Either Prometheus Benefactor's Building failed to confirm Wulian's specific condition as desired and was convinced of his own incorrect assumptions, or this deceptively inclined gentleman was deliberately concealing something, even reaching some kind of cooperation with that so-called other spirit. The man with deep gray eyes waited quietly for the other's answer. Currently, the explanation of an external spirit seemed closer to the truth. Thus, the now recovered Wulian, who according to Benefactor's Building should have lost all memory of his mother, shouldn't know nothing about that lady. Her hands were very cold, and her voice was very gentle, Wulian recalled in a tone almost like sleep-talking. She was always smiling, a quiet, faint smile. But she loved to tease people, loved telling jokes, and loved using her own poems to poke fun at friends, until she died. I don't know how she left us. What memory left me, what my father left me, what you all left me, only the fact that she is gone. Wulian lowered his head to avoid Dunn's gaze, blinking rapidly a few times, feeling a slight tightness in his chest. This wasn't a reminder from Benefactor's Building, but a memory from the original owner. He seemed to be gradually accepting this uninvited guest, bit by bit yielding everything that belonged to him, which was already next to nothing. Having received the expected answer, Dunn nodded thoughtfully. I will report your whereabouts to the Holy Cathedral, you may leave. He seemed in a bit of a hurry. His heart suddenly thudded a few times, making his chest feel slightly numb from the vibration. Wulian nodded obediently and left quickly. As he was heading out, a scruffy man with dark circles under his eyes walked past in a hurry, bumping his shoulder neither too lightly nor too heavily, without saying a word. Wulian's smile was stiff, but his speed didn't decrease, acting as if he hadn't noticed. Jelen, leave, quickly, Benefactor's Building uttered in a low voice. I know, Wulian replied just as quietly, a self-deprecating smile seemingly welded onto his face, impossible to erase. Lose the composure of an outsider, lose the sense of belonging of a Nighthawk, lose the identity of a Beander. Don't get involved, don't fall into the trap, only escape, only self-preservation, right? Perhaps. Snap. He discreetly pulled out a small piece of candle and simulated the sound of lighting it. Inside the office, Dunn, who had just watched Wulian leave, suddenly narrowed his eyes and stood up, holding the coffee he had barely sipped. Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you? In Roseanne's usual spot, the casual Leonard Mitchell greeted with a smile, considerately asking the visitor's request. Jelen scrutinized the man before him and spoke in a raspy voice, I need you to confirm if my home is safe, and catch the robbers who are disturbing my life. He pushed forward a stack of bills and coins. This is the deposit. I'll give you more depending on the situation after it's done. Thinking of the reaction a normal security officer should have, Leonard Mitchell glanced at the deposit Jelen provided and casually counted it. The amount was quite considerable, a full 15 pounds and 3 sol. All right, sir. Then, please tell us your address. Listening to the conversation in the reception hall, Klein Moretti took a deep breath silently and turned to look at his teammates who were also waiting in the corridor. Aside from Cohen Lee who remained on guard at Channy's gate, the Midnight Poet, Sika, Corpse Collector, Frey, Sleepless, Luo Yao, plus the captain in the office and himself as a clown. All the Beyonders of the Tinghan City Nighthawk squad were here. As for old Neil, since the captain led the squad to forcibly interrupt his loss of control last time, this mystery prior had been resting at his own residence, and today was no exception. Tap. Frey lightly patted Klein Moretti's forearm and headed outside. Klein Moretti understood and followed quickly, appearing before Jellin with him. "Oh, you guys are here too." Leonard Mitchell whistled in a roguish manner. "Don't worry, I'll call you once I've asked enough about the situation. I won't go on the mission privately." Who knew this guy Leonard Mitchell's acting was actually pretty good, or was he just playing himself? Klein Moretti suppressed his nervousness with a quip and replied with a smile, "With your character, how could we be at ease?" During the verbal sparring, he lightly tapped his left tooth, tentatively activating spirit vision. Hee. The dense, sharp laughter of a child rang in his ears, like some small, murderous animal gnawing at someone's soul. But before Klein Moretti could recover, the sound drifted away again, echoing ethereally within the reception hall. A wraith. Klein Moretti looked at Jellin himself without changing his expression. His body was extremely weak, his spirit quite excited, and his emotions, hesitant, angry, joyful. That child, with skin as deathly white as wall plaster, giggled as it climbed onto its father's shoulder. Its pale tongue, dripping with saliva, licked Jellin's face, leaving green marks like rotting flesh. Can the sofa he's sitting on still be used? Klein Moretti felt a wave of nausea. He was about to close his spirit vision to avoid the eyesore, but found that Jellin's body was weakening at a visible rate, as if his life force was being devoured by someone. Jellin looked impatiently at the two rude guys staring at him and scratched his itchy face. "Can't you guys be faster? I paid money." Skin flakes fell, carrying some pus and meat paste. But it seemed to be limited to just that. No. Klein Moretti closed his eyes and opened them again. There didn't seem to be anything unusual, yet his spiritual intuition was warning him that something was not quite right. Not having time to think too much, he tugged on Fry's sleeve and walked steadily and quickly into Dunn Smith's office. At this moment, their captain looked away from the telegraph machine and asked in a low voice, "Is there a problem?" A childlike wraith, corrosive, Frey said concisely. "Captain, I think it's more than that. Its danger level is much higher than what it shows. My spiritual intuition is giving a warning," Klein Moretti added with a grave expression. "Okay. Klein, have Luo Yao come to the office to watch the telegraph machine for me. I'll go replace Leonard Mitchell. Frey, go behind Channy's gate and take out sealed artifact, 30782. Be careful to keep your distance from the reception hall and don't provoke Jellin for now." "Yes, Captain." Klein Moretti and Fry's movements to leave paused slightly. Wait a moment," Dunn Smith's voice followed immediately. "I haven't talked to Cohen Lee yet. Frey, wait a bit, I'll write a note. Hey, calculating the time, the Red Gloves, Punishers, and Machinery Hivemind should be arriving soon. No need to be too nervous." "Well, that's very Captain." Klein Moretti thought helplessly, and for a moment, he really couldn't stay nervous. "Not right." Observing the reception hall faintly covered in green, Wulian was startled. "Corrosive, dangerous, plus Jellin hasn't made a move until now." He struggled to wake up, and as soon as he looked up, he saw the building before him covered in a green veil identical to the one in his dream. "Biological poison bottle." He squeezed these words out of his throat, his entire body drenched in cold sweat. He clearly wanted to help. He wanted to pull everyone into a dream before Dunn Smith activated his ability, and as a veteran, nightmare, Dunn Smith could easily break free from the dream and use the opportunity to find out Jellin's trump card. But when did he become an accomplice for Jellin, for Ince Zangwill, for 008 to stall for time? Wrong, everything is wrong. With a click, Wulian hurriedly extinguished the candle in his hand with a cap. But within his field of vision, no one was awake. The dream was still continuing. Is it Dunn Smith? How could it be? Dunn Smith? Wulian stared blankly at everything before him. A massive sense of dejection poured down like a torrential rain, drenching him completely. Only the pitying sigh of benefactor's building echoed in his ears. Side Story 3, Happy Children's Day. Same old rules. The character settings in this side story are completely broken, so throw away your brain before reading. According to International Convention, June 1, 2025, is the annual festival for all children, though children celebrating the holiday often don't get a break and even have to perform programs for a group of detestable adults after getting all dressed up. But, today is Sun Day. It's also a bright, sunny day with clear skies, gentle breezes, and pleasant weather. It would be a total waste not to go out in such wonderful weather. A certain pedestrian street. Lily, slow down. The tiny gray-eyed boy ran in short bursts to catch up with the little girl who was hopping along, and he lightly and carefully smacked her soft palm. Didn't Uncle Daly tell you to stay close to me? It's not safe to run so fast by yourself. The little girl pulled her hand back smoothly, then turned around, put her hands on her hips, stomped her foot, and puffed out her cheeks in one fluid motion. She looked up at Dunn, her green eyes brimming with anger. My name is Dolly. Why are you calling me Lily? Only adults call me that. But you told me you liked it before we left. Dunn pursed his lips aggrievedly, but soon straightened his back. No, he's a big kid in 2nd grade now, he can't be on the same level as a kid in the senior kindergarten class. So Dunn looked at little Dolly very, very firmly. Then Dolly, do you want some cake? Blueberry flavored. Dolly returned an equally sharp look. Yes. For the sake of the blueberry cake, Dolly very reluctantly let Dunn take her hand and led her away. Where are we going? As if to express her dissatisfaction, she intentionally made pitter-patter sounds with her steps, looking just like a little duck in a fluffy tutu dress. Dunn froze for a moment upon hearing this, looking helplessly at Dolly, who was running around without even knowing the destination. This little sister is so silly. It's a pet cafe that just opened. The owner has many kittens and puppies in the shop. Well, that's what my mom said. She also said the cake there is delicious, and the ice cream looks great too. Did your mom say if the cake in this shop is not sweet? Dolly asked warily. I think she did. Then it should be really delicious. Dolly breathed a huge sigh of relief. That's just how adults are. True, adults really are strange. They like unsweetened desserts, and they also like drinking very bitter coffee and tea. Dunn, who couldn't figure it out, nodded his head in deep agreement. The two children walked with their short legs for a few minutes, and the pet cafe named Cats and Dogs Meeting appeared before their eyes. Ding ling ling ling. Amidst little Dunn's heave-ho sounds of pushing the door, the welcoming wind chimes swayed leisurely, making a clear, cold sound like crushed ice hitting jade, which attracted several furry little fluffballs, and a shop owner. Happy Children's Day, you too. The shop owner pulled open the glass door that Dunn and Dolly had only managed to push halfway. Then she squatted down and greeted today's two little guests with a smile. Do you have a reservation? Or are you here to try the holiday lucky draw? Dunn tried his best to keep a straight face as he raised his left hand, revealing a phone watch with a camera function. We have a reservation for two. Here is the voucher code. The shop owner wasn't in a hurry to verify the voucher. Instead, she led them a few steps further to sit on a candy-colored upholstered bench and gave each of them a lollipop shaped like a triangular zongzi. Okay, let me scan it. She spun around to find her phone, which she had absent-mindedly misplaced, and completed the voucher verification somewhat unpracticedly. The cats and dogs are behind the door. They've all been vaccinated and dewormed, so they're very safe. Please put on shoe covers before entering, and wash your hands. Your set meal includes 2 desserts and drinks. Here is the menu, see what flavors you'd like. Blueberry cake. Little Dolly, having retrieved the keyword, said loudly, then, realizing this wasn't very polite, she added in a small voice, thank you, big sister. Alternate identity, heart-melting.jpg. Not bear kids, but fragrant, soft, cute, and well-behaved children. Ah, how wonderful. Dunn stared at the menu for a long while. Because he didn't recognize the character for Moose, and didn't want to just describe the pictures like a little kid, the boy, who had quite a lot of pride, had no choice but to change his target and said reservedly and politely, a tiramisu, please, big sister. After confirming the accompanying drinks and dining location with the two children, alternate identity led them to put on shoe covers, wash their hands, and enter the room with soft words. With a click, she closed the door that served as a partition. Meow ow 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 ow, a golden brown tabby Maine Coon, who had been waiting at the door early on, ran over with its feather duster-like tail swaying. It rubbed against Dunn and Dolly's legs with great familiarity, its voice high-pitched and dainty, looking for all the world like it was head over heels in love with them. Long hair, is she a girl? Dunn stared blankly at the large cat that was making a purr sound. Why does it keep making that noise? Is she sick? Dolly lowered her head to check nervously. Snoring while awake, does she have sleepwalking disease? PFF'd, cough, cough. Don't worry, little Wu is fine. A refined-looking boy wearing black-rimmed glasses, a loose white t-shirt, and a brown apron couldn't help but laugh. He squatted down to introduce the cat to the two little guests. His name is Wulian, and he's a boy. Purring means he's very relaxed and likes you very much. There's no need to worry. Dunn and Dolly looked at each other and breathed a huge sigh of relief. Then they were held back by this enthusiastic big cat, becoming immersed in its dainty and soft calls, unable to take a single step further into the room. Suddenly, meow, Wulian took a step back to escape Dun and Dolly's clutches, gave his ruffled fur a rustling shake, and then launched himself like a small cannonball into the depths of the room. He scooped up a white cat crouching in an oversized litter box and delivered a series of slaps. Dun and Dolly blinked their eyes in perfect synchronization. Come, little ones, here are your cakes and drinks. Alternate identity entered the room at the right time and set the food on the rattan table and chairs at the partition. Please eat here, you can watch the little guys through the glass, or watch the small TV here. If you need anything, remember to call me, or the big brother next to you. She winked at her diligent student employee, and Zhou Mingrui responded with a savvy, yes, sir, gesture. Little Wu seems to be bullying the kitten. Dun spoke up in a small voice to seek justice for the victim cat, turning his gaze back only to see the large fluffball starting to slurp, lick the white cat from before. Ah, don't mind them. It must be that idiot Weekend trying to taste the cat litter again. Alternate identity exuded the relaxed vibe of a parent. It's fine, little Wu is just giving her some tough love. In a way, Weekend is his pet. The two little ones' worldview seemed to have been refreshed. Leaving Wulian's honey trap, the satisfied Dun and Dolly finally began to go deeper into the cafe, seriously observing the cats, dogs, and people inside. A ragdoll cat named Furs was fast asleep clutching a salted fish plushie, her fluffy tail swaying unconsciously, becoming the target of a small leopard cat's pouncing and play. A beaming golden retriever lay expectantly in front of a blue cat that was pretending to sleep, earnestly inviting him to join the ranks of silly fun. A snow-white cat with pale red eyes let out a long yawn as it stretched, then suddenly looked around warily before happily rubbing against the plush kitten in its arms. And outside of all this bustle, a noble chinchilla half closed its emerald eyes, simply standing quietly in a corner, leaving a rather faint shadow for the world. Meow, hiss, meow, hiss, meow. The perpetual motion-like cries echoed through half the room. Dun and Dolly followed the sound and found a junior high student wearing a monocle pulling a cat. The black short-haired cat with amber eyes would cry out in fear every time the junior high student pulled it up, and once it regained its senses, it would start hissing fiercely at the student. But before it could even finish hissing, the poor cat was pulled up high again by the villain, starting a new round of miserable cries. Kid, please don't mistreat our employees. Zhou Mingrui stepped forward quickly and stopped the junior high student's further actions with a serious face. If you're caught doing this again, we will ask you to leave this room. Tisk, boring, ouch. Eamon was muttering some trash talk when his head was suddenly hit hard. He turned around angrily to look, only to see his own, cheap, older brother with golden hair and golden eyes, whose presence was always thin. The villain was punished, and he finally let go of the innocent Gelman. Bebe, is this how you do this problem? Huh, is this right? Force analysis. Look at what you wrote. And this small wooden block, didn't I make teaching aids for you? The Killjoy man, who was tutoring his daughter in physics on the grand June 1st, had a face full of disappointment. Your Chinese grades are so good, how can your physics be? At least your dad was a science student in high school. You didn't take after me at all. Even if Huang Jiajia stepped on the answer sheet, she'd get a higher score than you. Meow. The Abyssinian cat, with a hint of cleverness in its eyes, tilted its head, and after careful consideration, chose to kick the man's constantly opening and closing mouth. The world became much quieter. Capture. The man with bronze skin and low-tied black hair pondered for a moment with his chin in his hand, and with a click, he took a cannon from the opposite side. Seeing that the opponent was still lost in thought, he simply looked at the newspaper in his hand, occasionally stroking another amber-eyed black cat that was lying comfortably on his lap. Purr purr purr. The cat purred contentedly, unconsciously making some kneading motions. As he kneaded, he gave a shiver, his soft body arching high as he took a big stretch. Then this little fellow with fluffy, soft fur adjusted his position and snuggled back into the man's arms. Palas. The man saw the opponent make a move and looked back at the chessboard, saying somewhat helplessly, "Give me back my crossed river soldier, you can't even capture it." The handsome old man with slightly whitening flaxen hair, deep brown eyes, a high nose, and thin lips looked like he had been caught red-handed. He slowly put the soldier back, though the position was somewhat calculatedly off. After making another move, perhaps because he was annoyed, he looked at his green-eyed Alaskan dog that was circling around Klein and felt quite disgruntled. Leonard. Look at you, leaving the snacks and toys at home alone just to come here and suck cats. What's so good about other people's cats? That little Wulian was even raised by us, yet you're so indifferent to him. You money-wasting thing. Capture. The old man, who had made another move, was still huffing and mocking his own dog, but when his peripheral vision caught his opponent unknowingly moving the tampered rook, his already slight anger turned into the smugness of holding his head high with hands on his hips. Hey, I tricked him. I still think this set meal is not quite right, it's too expensive. We should have waited for the shop to have a promotion before coming. Melissa, calm down, calm down. Today is Children's Day. Didn't the shop also have a lucky draw for the promotion? Maybe we'll make our money back. Besides, we bought the set meal with a big discount voucher anyway. Benson hurriedly tried to dispel his sister's heartache. He hadn't spent this sum of pocket money behind their parents' backs just to make his sister feel bad. Seeing that Melissa's mood was still a bit low, Benson gritted his teeth and closed his eyes. Just think of it as wishing Klein success in his exams, okay? Let's help him relax. Look at him, he's becoming a nerd from all that studying. Little Klein, who had black hair, brown eyes, and a scholarly air, paused his gaze as he observed the interior, and it fell upon the two siblings who were slandering him with a hint of grievance. Hey, at home and at school, whether it's their parents or his brother and sister, everyone is telling him to study hard, study hard. Now they're complaining that he's a bookworm. He's just a bit quiet, that's all. Over the top. Klein secretly puffed out his cheeks, and his wandering gaze suddenly met a pair of bright, amber eyes. Little Klein, who had jumped down from Isaac's embrace, tilted his head and greeted this dull little boy who shared the same name, Meow. When Melissa took the lemon-flavored basque cake into her mouth and let it slowly melt, the last bit of dissatisfaction belonging to the little housekeeper vanished into thin air. Delicious. Are you having fun? A lady in a long black dress squatted down beside Dunn and Dolly, asking in a low voice with a smile. Teacher ammonizes. The two little ones were startled by the sound near their ears, their hair standing on end. They turned around and greeted her obediently with a mix of respect and fear. Their parents, for some reason, had hit it off and signed them both up for a dance class. Dolly was fine, the little girl was lithe and quite liked dancing. But the stiff-bodied Dunn had suffered quite a bit at the hands of this dance teacher, though he hadn't stepped on Dolly's toes any less because of it. Relax, I'm in a good mood today and won't eat children. Ammonizes made a rare joke. Happy Children's Day. Happy Children's Day, teacher, Dunn and Dolly responded obediently. As for whether there was something wrong with those words, the two terrified little ones couldn't afford to care. When the little guests left, alternate identity would take out a small drawstring cloth bag and ask them to draw a prize. Snacks, drinks, cake vouchers, free meal vouchers, school bags and stationery, small toys like balloons and Rubik's cubes, cat treats, dog food, just a little something, but it was indeed a nice Children's Day blessing. After the last guest left, Joe Mingrui, who had finished cleaning, took a big stretch and smiled as he took off his apron. Boss, I'm heading off work then. Go ahead, go ahead. Alternate identity seemed to remember something and held the small cloth bag up to Joe Mingrui's eyes. Do you want to draw one too? Joe Mingrui, already a college student, nodded with a smile and casually pulled a piece of paper from the cloth bag, just to satisfy his boss's quirky sense of humor. Would it be a snack or a drink? He was a bit tired of the cake. If he drew cat treats, he'd give Gelman an extra meal. The little guy had suffered quite a bit today. He thought absent-mindedly as he looked at the handwriting on the paper. A 5-day paid leave voucher. He rubbed his eyes and, not believing his luck, shook out the remaining slips of paper from the bag. A 3-day salary cash-out voucher, a 2-day double salary voucher, a 1-way reimbursement voucher for domestic travel expenses. I told you on your first day of work, our shop is a conscientious enterprise. Alternate identity shrugged her shoulders somewhat roguishly. Happy Children's Day, Student Joe. Chapter 50, Biohazard. When Dunn took over from Leonard and stood before Jelen, he confirmed that something had escaped his notice. Jelen was not abnormal, even though he was scratching at his own flesh, and even though his face was becoming increasingly ferocious and inhuman, he remained merely a pitiful, fragile, and weak fellow. The childlike wraith was also not abnormal, even though its appearance was terrifying and its behavior bizarre. It was still controlled within the dream, and its methods of attack were extremely limited. No, it couldn't just be the corrosive nature of its saliva. He had to probe for the loophole within the dream. He could try the sealed artifact, 30782, that mutated Sun Holy Emblem. Dunn paused, stunned. He knew what he had overlooked. Frey, bring the Holy Emblem here. He commanded in a low voice. This was the final confirmation. Accompanied by the sound of hurried footsteps, a warm, pure sensation gradually overflowed from the partition. The clear, holy, invisible radiance reflected in Dunn's eyes, provoking a dreadful shriek from the wraith, like oil poured into a hot wok. It was effective, but a sudden sharp pain made Dunn instinctively cover his eyes. The ensuing headache and nausea mercilessly diminished his ability to act. The faint stench of decay suddenly vanished, leaving his senses of smell and taste numb. He hoped it wasn't too late. This is a dream. Klein, who had just received orders from Dunn, had barely stepped out of the captain's office when a light, illusory feeling of weightlessness, like a bursting soap bubble, jolted him awake, making him notice subtle deviations in his teammates' usual states. He should have thought of it sooner, just like when dealing with the Wraith in Ramad Town, the captain always liked to use dreams to plan the next step of action. But what about the previous feeling of weightlessness? Frey, bring the holy emblem here. Dunn's low command clearly reached his ears from across the partition, the solemnity in his tone making his heart clench. What should he do? The revolver under his arm was loaded with demon-hunting bullets, with no misfire slots reserved. Several talismans of the night domain lay quietly within reach, and 2 sunfire talismans were easily accessible on the other side. Corrosiveness. Danger. If he considered this from a chemical perspective, no, that's far too unmystical. As he thought this, Klein's spirituality suddenly stirred. Frantic warning signals, mixed with a faint stench of decay, rushed into his head almost simultaneously, violently churning up his long-sealed memories. When he was very young, a neighboring province had suffered an extremely serious blowout accident, resulting in over 2,000 casualties and the evacuation of more than 90,000 people. Because it wasn't far away and the consequences were terrifying, his teachers had repeatedly warned him to watch out for the smell of rotten eggs, and be careful of hydrogen sulfide, fire prevention, explosion proofing, ensure ventilation, evacuate quickly. Ignoring the convoluted idea of scientific mysticism, Klein quickly organized his thoughts and urgently reminded Dunn at the end of his probing attempt, Captain, ventilation. Isolate the poison gas. Don't light a fire. In the surrounding residence, he thought of this again. Zodlin Street was too close to Red Moon Street, and too busy. Before Klein could think further, the dream woven by Dunn suddenly shattered. He returned to his standby position, his right hand unconsciously checking the status of his revolver. Faintly smelling a trace of decay at his nose, he noticed the layer of gauze-like greenness. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there, of clay and wattles made, 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the beloud glade. Dunn had stepped out of the office unnoticed, his mellow voice echoing throughout the room. Everyone, including Jelen and his son, was firmly covered by an invisible shield, like an airtight cocoon, giving the tense moment an unexpectedly otherworldly, utopian feel. The crisis was temporarily averted. Now it was time for reckoning. A wraith coming to the Nighthawks team, rounding up, that's basically a terrorist entering a police station. Klein rarely felt this relaxed. Dealing with just one wraith and one ordinary person, with the sole restriction being, avoiding fire, was naturally easy to resolve. They were followers of the night, not the sun, the Nighthawk member, who had 2 sunfire talismans tucked in his pocket, thought to himself. He wasn't needed here anymore. Wulian tucked a short-handled, verdigris-stained lens back into his pocket and rubbed his slightly aching left eye. Fire prevention, ventilation, isolation. Dunn's response was flawless. Hey, it seems using a Beander item to assist with the analysis was a bit redundant. Oh well, he couldn't have helped much anyway. Wulian looked around. The police department had done a good job of evacuating the nearby residents. Calculating the time, he hadn't left the Blackthorn Security Company when they arrived, so the busy officers had overlooked him. What a coincidence. He lowered his eyes and chuckled, feeling dispirited. The young man's figure silently vanished from the spot. Returned to his residence. Checked the luggage. Grabbed the ticket. Bring the cat. Where is the cat? Wulian tried his best to maintain outward composure as he searched the small residence thoroughly once more. It wasn't there. The doors and windows had been locked, and the furnishings in the room were simple and clear. Weekend had stayed here for a while previously, and she didn't have many usual spots. If Weekend had slipped out while he was opening the door, could Wulian, who was already a cryptologist, truly have noticed nothing? What exactly happened? Wulian's gaze drifted vaguely around the room, slightly lost in thought. I should respect your preferences, but it shouldn't be now, and it shouldn't be like this. Xianlu's words sounded untimely. You do not have the luxury to worry about your pet right now. Wulian knew Xianlu was right. 008 had crafted a clever story for the Tingen Nighthawks team, but the true author was Ince Zangwil. However, the malice targeting Wulin Sorov truly originated from 008 itself. If he insisted on staying in Tingen, whether to find the cat or warn the Nighthawks, it would only create opportunities for 008 to strike. Besides, no matter where Weekend had gone, her fate wouldn't be worse than constantly traveling with him and eventually getting implicated. Asking himself honestly, could he truly protect Weekend, this ordinary cat that any random jerk could injure, in front of all the monsters and demons of the Beyonder world? Wulian knew the answer to the question perfectly well. It was just, he should have arranged it earlier. Let's go. The young man's voice was hoarse, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. Wulian picked up his suitcase and left the room. Under the influence of various aids, Dunsmith's condition was exceptionally good. The habitually meticulous man naturally chose to use a dream for rehearsal when Jellin visited. This is the specialty of a nightmare, and a healthy Dunsmith would certainly not overlook it. This is a very reasonable development. Wulan Sorov, who missed the police questioning, realized his action was unnecessary and dispiritedly deactivated the effect of the Beyonder item. He relied too heavily on the nightmare ability, overlooking the possibility that Dunsmith, who was currently using a Beyonder ability, might confuse the dream with reality. Yes, by a great coincidence, the two dreams overlapped almost simultaneously. This significantly disrupted Dunsmith's judgment. Having apparently received a timely reminder in the dream, Dunsmith made the correct response, successfully controlling the situation using the power of the poem. Wulan Sorov's decryption using the Beyonder item was rendered useless, a joke. He returned to his residence very promptly, avoiding the hastily arriving punishers and the machinery hivemind, and did not hesitate due to his missing pet. Tisk tisk, truly an incompetent owner. Jellin and his beloved son naturally had no chance of survival. Dunsmith is an excellent leader. He led his team members in eliminating the pitiful Jellin and son, and waited for reinforcements to arrive. Interestingly, one of the hastily arriving folk of rage was too impatient, and actually activated the thunder talisman in his hand the moment he pushed the door, and it is quite common for sparks to flash from thunder. Then, boom. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.